Do you see now? Vodka, caviar. You're Russian. Done.
Bas.
Yeah.
Pronouns caviar. Huh? Okay.
Welcome to the Situation Room. Another bright and beautiful
Not yet bright.
Monday morning. Not yet bright.
No.
It was bright when I came in.
Lights, my brother.
It was the lights.
Yeah, electricity.
The steamer.
Steamer in action.
Okay.
Haijakatwa.
Good. Good. Final week of the month of July. And, it's also the day that the president is set to hold a summit with the governors. And they'll be reviewing the country's response to COVID-19. Today, we shall be discussing exactly that, the country's response to COVID-19. We'll be speaking to the medical doctors. We'll be speaking to people who are in charge of fighting this COVID. And also, we'll be speaking to the people who are all exposed to COVID-19. You and I. That's the conversation we'll be having today. And we'll be live on KTN Home from 7, no? 7 to 9. However, let's begin, like we always do, with the numbers.
Well, the numbers had Kenyans thrown into a tailspin yesterday for some reason. 960, the highest number yet. The highest number before that was 688. And so you skipped a couple hundred and got to 960, sending Kenya's numbers well over 16,000. Let's look at the global numbers first, and then we can look at Kenya in detail. 16,413,954 cases in the world, with 652,057 deaths. If you want to look at the world tally of deaths compared to the positive cases, it's still pretty low, having not yet hit 10%. But still, in some countries, however, the main contributory countries to these deaths continue to be the United States and Brazil. 4,337,839 cases in the USA, with the possibility of them hitting 150,000 deaths by the time this show is over. And it's that serious. 149,849 is where they are now. Brazil with 2.4 million cases and 87,000 deaths. India with 1.4 million cases and 32,000 deaths. Australia had a big day yesterday with over 400 cases having been found out in the last 24 hours, and it was world news immediately that happened, because as we said, they were looking at 50, 100, and then yesterday, out of the blue, 462 new cases. So eye on Australia, that's another one, and they seem to be ramping it up. Mexico now, with 5,480 cases in the last 24 hours. Today being Monday, this is what they're counting. Then within the last 6 hours, 306 deaths having been recorded. South Africa is very near to 500,000 cases with 445,433. They've got now 6,769 deaths. Okay, so those are the numbers that we're looking at. If you want to look a little closer at the Australian numbers, that has risen until Sunday, where now this is the end of, going towards the end of Monday for Australia. And the cases so far today, 532 cases with 6 deaths. With the cases they had been finding earlier, there were no deaths recorded. But now, over the weekend, they've recorded 6 deaths where they thought that they were staving this off. It has not yet quite happened.
Something that I feel we need to perhaps look a little closely is not so much even the COVID infections, but a little focus on those who have recovered and those who have died. Because you will find that, for instance, a country like the US, the numbers of people who are infected, those who have recovered is high.
It is.
But the numbers of those who have died are less than ours.
No.
Good, you're alert. But if you compare, yes, I've got my point. If you look at the numbers proportionally of people who have COVID, and then you look at the numbers who have died, ours are proportionately high.
Okay, in comparison to population.
In comparison to population,
You're talking about what, like deaths per million and such?
Yes. We are not doing well.
Okay, so if you look at the USA as an example, 453, that's the death per 1 million population, 453. Okay, if you want to look at Kenya as an example, death per population is 5. Death per 1 million in terms of population is 5.
No. Let's start again. All right? Death per population in the US per million is how?
453.
What's the population in the US?
300 million.
Okay.
For-
How many
For every 1 million people, 1 million in the US and 1 million in Kenya,
No,
1
the,
million,
the,
1 million.
the maths I've got. No?
Uh-huh.
So let's say we are 50 million. So how many times there? What, 6 times?
About 6 times.
Our numbers. So what you're saying is that if you look at 5 times 6, if we were at 30, then we would be equal to the US. Is that what we're saying? Yes. Just say yes. Just do the maths. If I was to compare, the population is 6 times ours. So if our death rate was comparable or comparable to the US, then it would mean instead of 5 per million, it should be 6. Then we would say
30 per million.
30, sorry, not 6, 30. The point I'm trying to get at is here. 5 may not seem like it is alarming, but in my mind, it is alarming. Why it is alarming is because if you look at the spread of A, the infection, B, death, you'll find the concentration is in certain spots. Now, where my problem arises is that this is how it spreads. If it isn't contained where it seems to be a clearly big issue, then what you're seeing in those areas that are alarming will very quickly and very easily spread to these areas which have almost no numbers to speak of.
Of deaths.
Yes, deaths. Forget infections, deaths.
Is there a correlation between the deaths and the infections?
Yes.
Okay. So the infections are high in some areas, and therefore you'll have high deaths in some areas.
Yes.
In those areas.
If you look at even the figures that we've been given about in Kenya, last week's papers, on I think 3 occasions, they pointed this out. You will find that the highest, if you look at those who have died from COVID in this country, a predominant number were either had diabetes or had
Hypertension.
Yeah, exactly. It was clear. And then again, there are people who will tell you that these are lifestyle diseases. And they'll also tell you they're directly related to age. But the figures are predominantly here in the city of Nairobi and some of the bigger towns. Now, I am saying that is a false notion because we had a governor from Laikipia who told us that when they did their little survey, they found that one of the problems their people had was hypertension.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, it doesn't seem to feature when you talk about it. You think lifestyle town. Laikipia is predominantly rural. So, there is a reality that...
And actually, Njeri has the highest NCDs in the country.
In the country, yes. So, what you're saying is that should this disease land
Properly.
in those places, we are going to have a genuinely serious problem.
Yeah.
That is actually where I'm going with this.
Well, I do agree with you. I think we're on the brink of a problem because, I mean, this being in, it's not too far off, CT. Unfortunately, that we're likely to see more than this. This 960, I know that everybody was, going a little bit crazy yesterday. Oh my goodness. It's going to get higher and higher than this. Likelihood of it is already here.
Thank you.
It's just that individuals have not
That's
been
my
tested.
view. It is already
here. It is already high.
It's just that
we don't have numbers.
No, we don't have the numbers because we haven't tested sufficiently, and there's a lot that hasn't been done, but the numbers are already here. The time you're hearing the 900, it simply means that more people have been tested and found to be. Otherwise, it's not something you look at someone's eyes and tell that they have. You have to test. So either more people are volunteering, more people are going to hospital because they're exhibiting some conditions that require for them to be hospitalized, and when they're tested. But testing is at the heart of these numbers that we're seeing.
Shall we get to a point, in some years down the road when the decision-making around COVID shall be audited?
It would be a good thing, Eric.
I said this from the very beginning. At some point, we shall come and audit who knew what decision did they make,
When? And at
Right.
what point did they implement?
Yes, because there are very many people who keep arguing, okay, look, we knew that there is COVID in the world, okay, and we started preparing ourselves and putting in measures. But what decisions were made and at what point? What decision was made to, for example, close airports and international travel into the country? Followed by that, what decision was made in terms of enforcing self-quarantine or quarantine measures? What decisions were made? And when was the decision made to say that you shall tell people within Nairobi, because this is where you can see the numbers, and now there's community transmission in Nairobi. Let's close down Nairobi. When was that decision made? What other supporting decisions were made after that? Because clearly we just closed down Nairobi, and we've talked about this very many times, and then we basically just turned Nairobi into an incubator.
I hear you saying that there's some
switch on the light and the chicks are there at night and they're just...
Yeah, whimsical decisions were made, it would appear, with the way in which this was being handled, unfortunately.
Given that we're in Kenya, and given that the president actually has an advisory board of eminent scientists, the issue is that age-old problem of you have people who actually know what ought to be done. And then you sort of like push it along to where it should be implemented, and then things go horribly wrong.
They just go haywire. Today, we are discussing whether the president should reinstitute lockdown or not. And there are those who are saying, come on. You incubated this thing in Nairobi, you spread it across the country, now you're saying lockdown
No,
what?
that thinking and that reasoning is actually a bit skewed. The fact that you've opened up and you see it isn't working doesn't mean you don't lock down again. It's really not complicated. Why do you keep it open when you can see what it has done?
Yeah, but what are you locking down? That's where the question is.
No, you are ensuring it doesn't spread further.
But what are you locking down? Is it locking down Nairobi again? That is...
Actually, if Nairobi is the epicenter
of little
of the
consequence.
disease, no, it isn't of little consequence. Because it is the movement that creates the vortex of people. So long as Nairobi is the epicenter, people keep coming to Nairobi. Please remember. Yeah? Forget people from Nairobi going out. That's what you think. People keep coming in. And when they come in and then they leave again, the situation gets worse. So if you lock it down, at least that coming in is stopped.
If you lock down the 4 million people within Nairobi, and you still allow them to walk around freely within Nairobi, they will still find their way out.
It's contained.
And you will still be having 4 million people in Nairobi.
Eric, it's contained because it's like saying when you have a ward of people who have tested positive, they're in the same ward. They even talk. But they've been isolated. There are people who have the disease. You know what you're doing with them. Yes. True isolation would be everybody has their room and they're locked up. The way the Chinese do it.
That's the thing.
That's what I'm advocating.
Unfortunately, to make a decision like that it would be very, very difficult to say that everybody must stay in their home for whatever it was, because we had a Chinese lockdown over at least 30 days, right? You're not moving, you need to get something, it's brought to you. Supplies are brought to you. But then you have to look at things like capacity and willingness for that kind of implementation here. If you want to see a situation where this thing is not moving, then you have to keep people that way.
Rwanda. So this thing is saying now. It's another conversation. Let's take a look at this is a situation of community discrimination. Remember that live streams are www.spicefm.co, as well as Spice FM, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.
...24/7, around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM.
All right, let's look at what the skies have in store on this Monday morning. It's mostly cloudy in Nairobi at 14 degrees, highs of 23 and lows of 13 to be experienced today. In Njeri, it's mostly cloudy at 13. We expect rain showers later with highs of 21 and lows of 13. Nakuru will be a wet afternoon with highs of 22 and lows of 13 with thunderstorms in the offing. Eldoret is partly cloudy at 12 degrees. We will see showers later, highs of 20 20 and lows of 12. It's 18 degrees and clear skies in Kisumu. It'll be partly cloudy later with highs of 26 and lows of 18. And in Kakamega, clear skies as well. A little chilly this morning, highs of 24 and lows of 14. Partly cloudy in Mombasa at 23 degrees. We will see showers later with highs of 27 and lows of 23. And in Malindi, where it's partly cloudy at 24, showers expected soon enough with highs of 28 and lows of 24. All right, let's step out of Kenya into Kampala, where it's partly cloudy at 17 degrees. We'll see highs of 26 and lows of 16. Dar es Salaam is cloudy at 22 degrees, highs of 31 and lows of 22. In Johannesburg this morning, right around 5 a.m., 6 degrees and sunny conditions throughout today with highs of 16 and lows of 5. Lagos is clear this morning at 25 degrees. We'll see highs of 29 and lows of 23. Clear skies for Sunday night in New York at 29. It's going to be a warm day when they do wake up. Highs of 34 and lows of 24. Paris this morning, clear skies at 17 degrees. Highs of 32 and lows of 17. London still enjoying the summer. However, it'll be a dreary day. 16 degrees and partly cloudy. Expecting showers later with highs of 21 and lows of 13.
Okay, at 21 minutes after 6 o'clock, this is this conversation. Let's begin the conversation with today's proverb.
Today's proverb falls into the category of the African proverbs. Many of the proverbs that I will be sharing this week will fall into that category. But towards the end of the week, I will be sharing with you some African proverbs that specifically refer to love. Mapenzi.
Well.
Today's proverb. A wise man fills his brain before emptying his mouth. Let me repeat it. A wise man fills his brain before emptying his mouth.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I'm filling my brain.
That's what silence means. Filling your brain.
Yes. Let's take a look at the big stories covered in today's dailies. Start. Go.
Okay. To lock down or not, what governors will tell Uhuru today? So this is the question, and most governors apparently, from what this report is saying, are opposed to a lockdown, and what they want to say to President Uhuru Kenyatta is no. Governors are opposed to return to partial lockdown, but are instead rooting for strict adherence to Ministry of Health guidelines in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, according to Council of Governors Chairman Wycliffe Oparanya. He told The Standard that in their meeting with President Uhuru Kenyatta today, governors will impress upon the national government to release the delayed share of revenues to counties to enable them fight the pandemic. He said the feeling was that people were slowly resuming their economic activities and are beginning to meet their responsibilities. To force them back, and I quote, to their homes is not solving the problem, given that the country is not ready to provide essential commodities to people during lockdown, according to him. He said Kenyans should be allowed to go about their daily activities, but strictly adhere to the laid down procedures in fighting the virus. And one more quote from him. Despite the stringent measures on COVID-19, the political class remains the weak link in this fight since they are flouting the rules. Let politicians lead Kenyans by abstaining from attending physical meetings and be deliberate on social distancing, among other guidelines.
This is Oparanya speaking.
Yeah.
I wish it was someone else. I wish it was who haven't we seen? I wish it was Nanok.
Yeah? Somebody you've not seen.
Yeah.
But does he not have a pivotal sort of like post within the Governor's Council?
Oh.
He's the chairman.
Oparanya.
He's the
Oparanya
chairman.
is the chairman of the
That's what I'm
COG.
saying,
Yeah.
pivotal.
Yeah. So maybe he's sending a message through this to his...
He's a politician, remember?
He is. There you go. Well, he also said that the council will also be reinforcing the need to disperse the county's equitable share of revenue because delay in doing so has grounded many operations within counties, including the fight against COVID. So do you see this? It's very
It's
interesting
all
that he
about
has
the
said
money.
this. Yes. So the reason why it would be seen across the country that counties are not able to fight COVID is because
They don't have money.
They don't have money. Funds have not been
But you know
dispersed.
what I find interesting here? Do these governors and their
Lieutenants.
and lovely
Cronies.
word, lieutenant. I was what I was about to what my mouth was.
I saw.
You saw. Thank you very much, Eric. And
I was forestalling
You
this.
saw. What I was fermenting. Do they know that they're going to have to account for these monies that they keep playing around with? And that day of reckoning is not far.
Nope.
This is 2020.
Yes.
And there'll be 2021. But before we get there, there's the rest of 2020 to get to. They are going to have to account for these monies because these are monies that the citizenry of this country have sweated and suffered, some have died for, to ensure is available for them to use for the benefit of these same citizens.
Yep.
And that is the one thing they don't seem to do very well.
This statement by the COG chairman is one of those that you just look at and you're like, all right, so it's a political statement that has just been made, and well, there's whatever else that he's thinking. First of all, he says, don't lock down. Give us the money, let people go about their business and do everything that they want. And then he says, politicians, let everybody observe the measures strictly. We are on what date since the first case?
March 13th, so that puts us
Is there
at 3
anything
months and 2
indicating
weeks.
to us that people are going to do what he's saying?
This adherence to Ministry of Health, I mean, come on, it's not going to happen.
Even
Adherence
if
to
we say that
Ministry
there's
of Health
adherence,
guidelines?
is there going to be proper adherence and enforcement of the same measures from today, after this meeting, after this summit?
So they finish the summit and then everybody will fall in line.
Yeah.
Because it has been said.
Look,
Because it's been said.
if you simply do a spot check and talk to people from all the 47 counties, let's leave Nairobi out for the time being, all right? Because the Ministry of Health and Police work very, very well together in ensuring, and I'm saying this deliberately, that health has become a police matter, okay? It works. You're threatened, the life is threatened out of you. Most parts of this country, people do not wear masks. Just start there. Number two, if they have a mask and you talk to them, they'll tell you, yes, they have, but they keep it for a day when they're going out. It's like a special garment that you wear on special occasions.
Sunday, Sunday best.
Yes, but for every day where, this disposable mask that people have, somebody will come to the neighbor to borrow their mask so that they can go to the market. Borrow.
Yep.
The reality is this. These safety precautions we talk of, they were heralded and there was an attempt to actually adhere to them at first. Whether it's fatigue, whatever it is, has set in now. And believe me, what is needed to be done to basically keep this demon of COVID at bay is not being done right across the country. And the country is represented by the counties. So what is this thing these guys are telling us?
They want money.
What
Something
on earth
new.
are they telling us?
They need the money. The
They,
reason
no,
why
not
they've-
need, want.
They want the money.
The
Whatever
most painful bit
whatever
is
they
the
should
story
have
on the
done, they've
nation.
not.
Yes.
That's talking about the report on the county's preparedness,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
What is that? What does that story say, City?
Let me just read the first bit. It says, the push to have counties prepare for COVID-19 is slowly turning into a scandal. We mentioned it here, remember?
It was a scandal from
After it emerged that some governors lied that they had attained the 300 isolation bed capacity, an inspection ordered by President Kenyatta ahead of this crisis meeting on the pandemic today has revealed that only 5 counties, 5,
Out of 47.
yes, and not 26 as reported by the Council of Governors last week, have set up 300 beds. Now, you tell me.
Why would you lie about something like that?
So here we are. We are not saying that Kenyans lied. We are saying that
We're specific.
Yeah.
governors had presented these numbers to the COG, and the COG chairman had read out these numbers and said, all right, out of the counties that have 27 beds, and he's read out some 27 names, some 300 beds, some 27 names,
Yeah.
some counties. Oh, I don't know, Njeri, what,
26,
what.
yeah.
Then a report actually just finds out that the ones that have a 300 proper bed capacity that is specific to COVID.
Perhaps I should read this so that
5.
you actually understand what the findings were as reported in the nation. The counties that were said, originally this is what they said. Mombasa 432, Machakos 373, Nyeri 340, Kiambu 325, Uasin Gishu 324, Makueni 312, Kisii 310, Kilifi 308, Moranga 305, Homa Bay 300. Okay? Now, however, according to part of the inspection report dated July 24th,
Last week.
Friday,
Just the other day.
okay? Njeri 188, do the maths. Kilifi 271, Baringo 88, Turkana 30, Nakuru 184, Narok 56, Embu 187, Meru 106, Kajiado 25, Kwale 72, Bungoma 25, Busia 195, Vihiga 105. Now you tell me.
So according to this report, then compared to what they had presented earlier, the only counties with what would be true representation are Mombasa, Machakos, Makueni, Kiambu, and Wasingishu.
Don't be too eager. They said this is just part. If we had a whole list, then we'd be able to
Then
speak,
we'll be able to do this, but-
comprehensively. Yes.
I do remember this
But the
number.
report says only 5
Only 5,
have,
right?
have reached the 300 threshold.
So what does that tell you? 5.
So
This
that's-
is 60 days after that first meeting where the county governments were told, let's have another 30 days where we shall build your capacity and at least go to 300 and then we shall reopen the country. Okay?
And they were given, by the way, they were given money.
Alfred Mutua of Machakos, which is one of those counties that have reached the 300, sat here and told us, all right, so I received, how much did he say he received?
108.
Out of the 5 billion, he
got
received 100
108
million shillings.
108 million.
And he went and put it straight into this
Health.
COVID measures.
And he said very specifically,
I
you know,
do remember this number 432.
Yes,
Actually,
yes. He said, you know, I put 70% of my budget on health.
Yeah.
It means other areas will suffer, but I had to do the maths and decide which is more important. Now, to me, that sounded like somebody who's being realistic. What is the use of having a good road and people are dying? Is it a catch-22?
No,
It really is not.
it's not a
Isn't.
catch
It
22
really is
at
not.
all.
No.
It's straightforward.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward thing, and especially when you talk about your capacity, and then you put you present numbers that you know are not real.
Now, let me ask you
You
something.
go straight ahead and say that I have 300 and whatever bed capacity
And you
when
know
you
it's a
have
lie.
56.
Okay, now
Narok
look
has
at this.
56.
Council of Governors chairman
56.
says that what we will do is there's no need for lockdown. What we will do is maintain strict adherence to the Ministry of Health. And you see that there is a report whereby the same counties, governors, not anybody else, have given false reports in terms of what they have available. A basic, according to the bare minimums that they were given, this was one of them.
Yeah.
That you must have 300 bed
Mr.
capacity
Oparanya's
within.
report
And
on
he's telling us
Friday,
that they will adhere to
the
government
State of
protocol.
Devolution report said that only 21 had not met.
Yeah.
On Friday.
Brazen, open,
Lies.
naked lies.
Lies.
Because he was just reading a report that he had received. After
know-
this, now he's saying, by the way, in this meeting with the president, I'm not going to present any figures. Let every governor say.
Say for themselves.
Prudent.
Let every governor say.
Prudent, because you're given a report, you believe your fellow cousin, brother,
You would
sister,
believe that the
governors.
person who was giving you this information was giving you a true representation
Yeah.
of what's going on.
Yes,
You would
As-
think that the
as
person
you
who
would
was doing
expect.
this-
As you-
Yes,
and-
as you would expect of somebody who was sitting in that position. I mean, are you kidding me?
And then you
Are you
put,
telling a
you put
lie
your neck on the line, you read happily.
Surely.
Then a report is brought forth. When
You even write a report and you sign it.
yes. And then the inspection report by the president tells you,
Something
sorry,
else.
5.
Or, you know what? They probably didn't think that
Okay,
the president
let's
was
take a
going to
break.
send this inspection report.
Let's take a break. 27 minutes to 7 o'clock. It's a situation room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Taking a look at the traffic and then back to newspaper headlines.
It's already looking good this morning. Not much drama so far. Around about 6:30, Juja Road traffic is quiet this morning. In and outbound, it looks good. Mombasa Road starts from the JKIA entry. Unfortunately, it's already jam-packed. Bumper-to-bumper traffic is what we see at about 4 minutes ago, and it's likely to be this way for most parts of the morning. It is a Monday morning, and a lot of people getting out into doing what they need to. Comark Road traffic also along number 36, Kariobangi. We see that there's quite a lot of traffic there this morning as well. Kangunda Road to Outering and Umoja is looking good this morning. Not too much in terms of drama. Coming out of Athi River, we know that the fog is quite low this morning, so this is affecting visibility. So need you to be careful there. Thika Road in and outbound, some traffic this morning. Getting to the Pangani underpass and into the CBD is looking a bit crazy right now. Traffic is tailed back as far as Safari Park Hotel already. We'll look at what it looks like, but the service lanes are available for use. You don't have to stay on the main expressway. Coming out of Westlands and getting towards the roundabout and then to Huru, or rather to the University roundabout in the CBD, not bad either. So it's looking good in most places. A bit of a hold up here and there in other spots. We'll look at how that opens up in a short while. Spice FM KE also let us know what you see.
We'll dedicate the rest of the show today to COVID-19 this week. Governors. So we'll revisit what we were just talking about. Let's look at other headlines before we get to the top of the hour. 24 minutes to 7 o'clock.
All eyes on the Senate and the big three on county cash stalemate. Positions of Uhuru, Raila and Ruto, or rather Uhuru, Ruto and Raila on the third basis formula will pass or sink the debate. When the Senate meets tomorrow, which is Tuesday, all eyes will be on the voting patterns, the political horse trading and the hidden dynamics that will emerge out of the revenue sharing debate. For beneath the acrimonious formula and debate on the disbursement of cash to the counties is a widening crack that exposed the weak links to national politics. As senators go back to the House, divided on an acrimonious formula that will be used to share out 316.5 billion shillings allocated to counties this financial year, the position of the main political players, President Kenyatta, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, and Deputy President William Ruto, will either pass or sink. This is their Achilles heel. Above the din of the revenue debate, the shape and face of the Uhuru succession debate will be made.
Why?
According to this story.
Surely.
My goodness.
You don't think so?
Not particularly. I don't think so.
You don't see like when you bring in those
doomsday
three
scenario.
No, when you bring in those three names, what is it that you're shaping up? You're shaping up to 2022, right? Even the headline in the Standard today is saying no rest for Raila. Rude interruption. Ideally, the ODM leader is supposed to be resting after a successful surgery, but the exigencies of brinkmanship in the Senate and succession politics again, have sucked him into the center of political standoff that may end up looking bad on him, whichever move he makes.
You know, it's like saying that, it has rained, there's water everywhere, and if you walk in the water, you'll get wet. Of course, it's obvious you will get wet. These are politicians. We know 2022 is around the corner. We know that President Uhuru is not going to be president again.
So far.
So we think. And what are we hearing that is really new? This is really my response. I'm saying it's being heightened. A little drama is being thrown into it. Throw in the three big names, throw even Kalonzo into it so that you have four big names, and talk about intrigue and counter-intrigue and intra-intrigue. And then to make it an interesting story, what is the story here? The story here is that you have an issue about sharing revenue in the Senate that has a stalemate. Where is the stalemate?
Where is the stalemate?
Yes.
Probably this is what is trying to explain that stalemate. The stalemate here is not because the senators cannot really sit down and be objective. The stalemate here is because they are listening to their leader. Each of them is listening to their leader, and the leader is wondering, so what move do I make?
Eric, it's important that the news we read is interesting, but I sometimes think that some of the people who write have wasted their talent. They should write. They should actually endeavor to write fiction because they would do better.
you don't think that there's the 2022 succession has a hand to play in this standoff?
The 2022 succession began with the Tanga that was the Tangatange.
Bas.
Okay. It began then, and it began even earlier. The Tanga Kileweke just gave it face.
Yep.
Okay. Then BBI gave it face. All right. Now face is being removed from there and being taken to the Senate. It's always been there in the background. This is really what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
And this is just to spice it so that the conversation continues, and those who buy newspapers continue buying newspapers.
It's just spicing the conversation.
Yes, but what I'm asking is, surely at some point, the president and his handshake buddy were going to discuss this thing if they haven't already.
Yep.
Okay. At some point, they were going to look at some of the partners within the political scene whom they might need and bring them in. This
And the implications
isn't, yes,
therein.
this isn't business unusual. This is business as usual. This is how these things are sorted out. And then people agree. You know that's it, that's so and so left. Can you give it to my so and so? Business as usual. But this time, with a little drama added onto it.
You see your profile on this show, City, is, what is it? In this and political times. There's a word that goes in there.
Difficult,
Unpredictable political times. What is it that we say that? What are you? You're the guy who sits. You're the guy who can see the bigger picture. So you can see the big picture, and that's why this headline to you in the newspaper will be like, yeah. So what? But everybody else who does not see the bigger picture needs to see it.
Yes, because if you look at the standard newspaper, essentially what you're being told, Baba, while you are away,
Yes.
Things happen.
Things
So
happened.
Fortunately, he's just around the corner.
Heal very quickly and come back, please.
Yes. Now,
Because the rats are scampering
it's
on
just
ship.
part of what we be. The thing that to me is of interest this morning is how the underbelly of the governors has been exposed nicely. And all those protrusions that they've been hiding in baggy shirts, forget.
In terms of what they've done with the money.
Yes, in terms of what? No, not what they've done. What they have been doing with all this cash that they have been receiving. And then you have a scenario where, in my mind, senators who now want to be governor are thinking, now, when I'm governor, how much money do I want to be having at my disposal so that I can be a good governor?
Yep.
So all this comes into play in the Senate issue. So it's not a question of this kind of counties. So what do? We the media, assess this whole scenario by saying some are losing, some are winning. If you look at the division of spoils from day one, this give and take has always been there.
It's always been there.
It's not being invented now.
And the thing is now, there are those that have been gaining consistently.
Yes.
With the past two formulas.
Yes.
Right? And now, because of this new formula, they are going to lose. It's clear.
What is going
For
to happen?
example, the allocation, like
yes.
what the standard has actually broken it down very well. Let's start with the losers, all right? If this formula is adopted and implemented, out of the share of 316.7 billion shillings that goes to the counties this year, Wajir County is going to get 2 billion shillings less. Okay? Because it's the same amount that we had last year that we are giving out to the counties this year. 2 billion shillings less in Wajir County.
Yes.
Marsabit Mandera, 1.9 billion shillings less. Garissa, 1.6 billion shillings. Tana River, 1.5 billion. Mombasa, 1.6 billion. Kwale, 1 billion. Then you have Nandi County, which is going to get an extra 1.3 billion shillings.
Yes.
And Wasingishu and Nakuru, 1.1 billion each. Kiambu, Kakamega, 1 billion each. Trans Nzoia, 994. Bungoma, 926. Kirinyaga, 762. Bomet, 730. Pokot, Siaya, Migori, Kericho, Busia, Machakos, Laikipia, and Embu. The ones that are going to get at least more money this year than they got last year from the same equitable share, just because of the change in Nini.
Yes.
Now, where I'm actually heading, so yes, there's the issue of the loser and the gainer. I mean, there's somebody who's going to get more money this year than they got last year, and somebody's going to get less than they got last year. But on the other side that I keep arguing about is how the story is then slanted to show that the president is the one who's pushing for this formula, that this is Uhuru's formula. It's not CRA formula. It is Uhuru's formula.
All along it has been CRA. Now suddenly it's Uhuru.
It's Uhuru's formula,
else
and
would
it's
you-
because Uhuru wants his Mount Kenya people to get money. I have just read the gainers.
How else would you make something that has been dancing about in the headlines for the last 2 weeks a little bit more interesting for people to pay attention to? How else would you do that without adding this angle?
But it's a very dangerous
It's
angle.
a very dangerous
it's
angle, I
deadly,
would
actually.
admit.
It's very dangerous
I
because
would
we
admit.
know what has been said about Mount Kenya and Central before. And now when you say
Someone
that
is
this,
fanning that flame.
this is Uhuru, who is a Kikuyu from Central,
Yes.
and he's the one who's pushing for this formula
So that
the
his
cent-
Kikuyus can get more money. Now, look at that narrative.
And yet the gainers are Nandi 1.3, Wasingishu and Nakuru 1.1, Kakamega a billion, Trans Nzoia 994, Bungoma, Kirinyaga, Bomet, West Pokot, Baringo, Siaya, Migori, Kericho, Busia, Machakos. How many of those are?
Another headline has gone as
So they're
far
all in
as
Central. You didn't know.
Another headline has gone as far as to say that Uhuru is basically damned if he does or damned if he doesn't actually get into this conversation about the stalemate with the senators. So again, putting him right in the middle of this, which I do agree is extremely dangerous.
But look at this stalemate.
Whereas it could be looked
Nduh.
at something as simple as revenue sharing by counties.
Nduh, where's the stalemate? Let's ask ourselves that question. You need to understand the camps, isn't it?
Yeah.
There is a camp within Jubilee that has made it their duty to oppose anything and everything that appears to be championed by the president, true or imagined. Okay?
Yeah.
Then there is the opposition who shook hands with the presidency or the president, okay, through their leader, one leader. Then now you have part of the opposition who now want to sign a coalition, okay? Then you have the other Jubilee who are not part of this. Then, lastly, and most importantly, you have a situation where some 2 terms are ending for some governors, so they will not vie again. It has been obvious to many of the senators who are here because the ones who pass this money, they know the monies that they're talking about, who now want to be governors.
Yes.
And we've seen this happening before. So their interest has also come into play and is muddying these waters. So it isn't one thing. Where does Uhuru come in?
There you go. This is the question. That's why I'm saying something had to be thrown into the loop to make this story a little bit more spicy, I think is the word that you had used before. And unfortunately, what has been thrown in is a very dangerous ingredient at this point.
Deadly.
It's very dangerous in terms of throwing that in. And not just his name, but other names too.
Even Raila
and
Ruto's.
Ruto, throwing them
the
in
senators
here at
should
this
basically
point
lock themselves up and do their
and
job.
make the decision, because truly I know that many times when you see a headline it is a smokescreen for something else. I know that, but in this case, guess what? 316.7 billion shillings needs to be shared amongst counties. The senators need to get this decision done so that we can move on. It has nothing to do with these other 3 individuals.
You know, this is where the story of the emperor's clothes comes in. All right? Because the governors always want to present themselves as the champions for the common suffering Mwananchi in their counties. And it's becoming clearer and clearer that is really not the case. A simple case of something called COVID, simple in the sense that it is understood, money has been set aside, you've been given. 5, they've postponed. The national government has said it is okay. And when the inspection is then done, even this meeting that they are having, supposed to have tomorrow, it was postponed. It's today. It was postponed at
From
their request.
Friday, yeah.
Yes. Still, we have the situation that we have right now. So, if you are a senator and you can see all these things, don't you see a nice gaping hole for you to sort of like fit into?
Clearly.
Yeah, because you're thinking, wait a
Cleanly.
moment. This level of incompetence is actually at the level, it's at a stratospheric level.
It's flabbergasted.
You have money, you've been told what to do with it, you even know. And the government, by the way, governments, man, they have the personnel, trained, they know what to do. Expanding, and most government facilities have space. It's not that they don't have space. Still nothing. Nothing.
Even putting up a field hospital,
Yes.
which is beds and tents.
That's it.
And then provide sanitation services,
That's
toilet,
it.
water.
That's it.
We saw that happen. A quick chap in Mombasa, in Machakos.
We've seen
in
it.
Makueni. We saw that happen.
Decisions, people who make decisions, and you see it's being done. So, let the drama continue for a while.
12
likely
minutes
to.
to 7 o'clock. Let's take another quick break. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. 10 minutes to 7. It's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, looking at the big headlines in the papers today. Shall we do the blood issue?
Let's touch this blood issue.
Okay.
And this misreporting that has come our way.
Okay. So, headline says pregnant women at risk in blood shortage mess. That is clear, right? That when you have a blood shortage, then pregnant women are going to be at risk. Coronavirus has drained blood banks, even as a majority of donors keep off donation centers for fear of contracting the disease. I see where corona comes in. Okay. So the story talks about, highlights a couple of women who have sought services in hospitals, like this one on June 9th, 2020. Betty Kiplagat, a first-time mother at 26, had a safe delivery and was elated as she held her bundle of joy. As she cuddled her baby at Chemolingot Hospital in Baringo, the mother began bleeding excessively and became unconscious. Referred to Rift Valley Provincial General Hospital wing in Nakuru, located about 160 kilometers away. On arrival, she was taken to theatre, but she would later succumb to excessive bleeding. The following day, sadly, her baby also died. So, there was no blood at the bank.
There was no blood at the banks before corona.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now with corona, people are not, even the few people who are donating blood, in those occasional people donating, people are not even going to the hospitals to donate blood.
I understand this. I can understand why, because of the importance of staying away from medical facilities because of corona.
Yeah.
However, we must understand that this problem had already gotten onto core proportions before corona made its debut. We saw that in various towns across the country, and remember these reports came in Kericho, Thika, even here in Nairobi. There were people who we say that were the perennial donors, and those who would even donate every now and then. They would go and offer to donate, but they could not accept their blood. Why? Because, number one, it had ground to such a halt that they didn't have kits in terms of collection. They couldn't collect. They had nothing in terms of equipment for collection of samples. So what I'm trying to say is that although it would be nice to throw everything at corona, it happened before corona came in.
And even then, the centers that were known not only to collect but to store did not have the reagents that were required. The equipment itself that was in 6 separate places. At that point in time, when we last spoke of it, only 3 were functional. And the numbers just kept getting less. So, this is misreporting. The truth of the matter is, the blood donation center or anything related to blood donation in this country had gone to the dogs a long time ago. Long time ago. And any effort that appeared to have been made to write it was just that it was talked about.
It was just talked about.
There was
And there was
no
money
change.
allocated, especially
There was
during this
money
COVID
allocated.
time.
Yes, there was.
Money allocated.
I remember specifically that I can't
of the
remember
World
the
Bank
amount,
money.
but it was World Bank money.
$1 billion
and
shillings went straight to blood.
To blood. It was specifically for blood.
Yep.
So, look, it's Monday. And we need to
You do a wusa and start of the week on a happy
week
note.
well.
But also
But
think
I'm just
about
going
it.
to get very
Credit to
annoyed here when
Masika
money
Henda,
was
who
given.
wrote this story, though, is that she's actually quoting the Ministry of Health Chief Administrative Secretary Rashid Aman, who admitted the country is experiencing shortage of blood, an issue being addressed to avert deaths and health-related complications. Aman attributes the shortage to COVID-19 pandemic that has caused fear among donors in visiting donation centers. The CAS also says leadership wrangles at the KNBTS have affected blood donation drive.
Leadership wrangles at the KNBTS had grounded blood donation drives to a halt. In fact, they had removed the engine, the chassis, everything, the key from the ignition.
Everyone had gone with a
Nothing
piece.
was happening. Everybody had gone with a piece of this particular vehicle, and it was done. This was before. And then to think, so now you want to ask the question, if you want to even get into a bigger kettle of fish, this 1 billion that was then given towards blood from the World Bank.
Where did it go
Where
to?
did it go?
What is it doing, right?
Yes.
Where did it go?
$1 billion is a lot of money.
A billion shillings is a lot of money. It's 9 zeros, CT.
And you're not talking about creating new centers. You're talking about a system that existed.
To support the existing system.
Yes, but it had lain fallow simply because they argued they didn't have money. Okay, they were now given money.
Now where?
And you know something? This story of COVID prevents people from donating blood. I'm not buying it either.
And because you're afraid to go and donate.
People visit the sick in hospital even with COVID.
Before this happened, people would present themselves to donate blood, and they were told, actually, we cannot receive your sample because we don't have the equipment or the reagents needed to test
We
it.
can't do anything with this thing.
I beg, they should come and go, Joe. It's not. We should stop joking around on some issues here. They gave you money, you can't do anything with it. Even before the thing was a mess, and you want to come and talk because it's corona, then therefore
Everything
you
is
can't.
corona.
Everything is corona. I know that she's a bad chick, but come on, man. There's some things that you can't throw at this one for now.
She's evil, this one.
I mean, even Jezebel.
You know, even her, to be honest, man, there's territory she controls. The others she has no say over.
Yeah.
None whatsoever. You're talking about people taking their sick to hospital. You know, if hospitals were as bad as we claim sometimes, people wouldn't go there. They'd be empty. They are not empty.
People are still going to hospital.
Yes, and the hospitals are the ones who are limiting people from visiting. And you're not going to tell me that if someone is really sick and they require blood, that relatives won't donate. They will donate.
Yeah. Yep.
They will donate.
You just need to call on them and they'll donate.
They'll
blood.
donate.
Ask
So,
people come and donate blood.
they will donate.
If you just did a blood drive, in fact, part of that 1 billion shillings was meant to do that, just to ramp up the blood capacity.
We cannot excuse the inefficiency and the ineptness of the Ministry of Health in this regard to blood issues and say it is COVID. No.
It's one of those that, you just wonder, okay, so how many things are we going to blame on COVID in this country? Everything now is COVID.
I want to see how this story of the governor and the president pans out today. This one is going to be interesting. I want to hear it.
Get your popcorn and drink.
I wish the summit was actually going to be live, like open
Now,
to
that
all
would
of
be-
us.
yeah,
that
that-
would be the best. In fact, that's what the president should do. Just expose these guys.
Now tell everybody. Don't
Before we
just
get
tell
to
me.
the hour, let me just mention something that I was reading in the Business Daily. The diaspora. For the longest time now, inflow from the diaspora in this country has been one of our biggest foreign exchange earner, if not the biggest. In May, we were at $258 million US dollars. We are now in June. In June, it rose to 288, meaning despite COVID in all those places where Kenyans work, it's like they realize
They
our
knew
people
that
are suffering.
Our folks at home are not doing
Yes,
all right.
they're
We need to
supporting
sort.
more and more.
They are supporting more and more, and they have the same problems as we do.
Yep.
But you know why this is possible? Many of them are in countries where the government actually takes responsibility for its people or the people within its borders.
Right.
So the remittances are increasing. And
Yes.
that also tells you something. Even locally, the remittances from urban areas to the rural areas have also increased.
They have.
Which tells you that if this government had actually initiated those measures, like I was saying, at that point when you said lock down Nairobi, if you had come up with a program using just the government facilities itself and even come to the people and tell them, look, we'd like to support our people, this could have been handled.
It could have.
What we were talking about the other day with Charity saying, if you just imagine supporting 20 million people in Nairobi, 2 million people in Nairobi with 3,000 shillings every month, that is 6 billion shillings.
Can do it.
It was extremely doable.
Yeah.
Doable, not doable. And you're dealing with Nairobi, and they've said contain this thing within Nairobi, tell people stay at home within Nairobi, and bring down the numbers.
You know, where I go for my haircut, I had a very interesting conversation with the people who work there. One of them was telling me about how their child has benefited from this Kazi Vijana Mtani. Many people who've worked for that money have used that money to take their families home. So for them, it's a solution.
Yep.
Now they're back in town and they can now breathe. And they can work harder. Now,
They can work harder.
imagine what Eric has been saying was actually done.
If this Kazimtani was done within Nairobi, that cash distribution was actually done within Nairobi. Pop, 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 pop. Anyway, coming to the top of the hour. CT, today's proverb.
An African proverb. A wise man fails his brain before emptying his mouth.
Wise man fills his brain before emptying his mouth. Asante sana. I think that one is self-explanatory, but you'll have to give us the context, today's context, and why you picked that one. Good morning. This is A Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. It's now 7 o'clock.
All right, let's look at a different aspect of traffic right around now. Quite a number of people complaining that matatus that they're getting into on Juja Road, in Islay, Jogo Road, that they are filled to capacity and drivers and conductors are not obeying any kind of regulations whatsoever. Many ways of spreading corona, even with public transport. So I guess, look here, a matatu is full to the brim. Don't board it, guys. Find a way to actually contribute towards breaking the spread of COVID. All right, let's look at how traffic then is moving. Mombasa Road already from about 6:30 this morning was looking crazy. Bumper to bumper traffic all the way from the JKIA turnoff, and that's leading all the way down to General Motors. It's going to be that way for most parts of the morning. We can just tell. All indications all the way to Nyayo Stadium roundabout and then joining Uhuru Highway. Uhuru Highway then traffic all the way through to Westlands, getting into the CBD from Thika Road. Not so bad. Around the Pangani underpass, that stretch, a little bit of traffic, but shouldn't be too terrible for most parts. All right, we'll look at other trouble spots in a short while and look outside of the Nairobi metropolitan area and see what it looks like there. You see anything we should know about this Monday morning? Don't hesitate to let us know. Spice FMKE. That's how you can reach us on Twitter. We want to keep it moving this Monday morning, and it already looks a little bit crazy, so let's help each other through this.
A very good morning to you and welcome to the second hour of The Situation Room. This is Kenya's biggest conversation and we're now live on KTN Home. Good morning and welcome, KTN Home audience. This is where now the rubber starts meeting the road. Because from this point on, we're going to be discussing what is expected to come out of State House today. The president is going to be meeting with the governors from all the 47 counties. Of course, we expect the meeting to be a virtual meeting. And they will be reviewing countries' preparedness to combat COVID-19. And actually, countries' response. We are no longer at that preparedness point. It's the response of each and every county in combating COVID-19. Let's start with the issue of the medical professionals and what they think about this, okay? So already we've seen, and we expected that this was going to be the case because medical professionals are the ones in the front line, and we have already called them that, our frontline soldiers in the fight against COVID-19. They are most likely to be exposed to the virus because people coming to seek medical assistance and they don't even know whether they have COVID-19 will come into contact with a doctor. And this is why the government was even dedicating a lot of money in the budgetary allocation to secure the medical practitioners by getting them the PPEs. Now, we've seen a lot of conversation, and this conversation has been coming up from all over the country, about doctors and nurses and other medical practitioners who are saying, look, we do not have PPEs. We don't have access to the PPEs. How many medical doctors so far have tested positive in the country? 531 medical practitioners have tested positive of COVID-19 in the country. And according to the Clinical Officers Union Secretary General George Gibore, he says 72% performing aerosol generating procedures, and therefore they are exposed. 8 medical practitioners have so far died out of COVID-19.
Something as simple as they don't have N95 masks.
Yeah.
Simple as masks, yeah.
Yes.
And yet, this is a conversation that we've been having. So when we now say that we have opened up the country, now it's a whole country that's dealing with COVID-19, you have to imagine that people are not going to be going to the main level 5 hospital in a county to seek assistance if they feel that they have COVID-related symptoms. They will go to the nearest health facility. A nearest health facility from the ground if those people do not have PPEs, then you're saying you're exposing the medical practitioners there to COVID.
Right, that's the unfortunate thing. And we saw a report yesterday, on the news, whereby in, some parts that some medical professionals are even being asked to purchase their own PPEs, which is a problem. Because then the question is, of all the donations that were made, if we just want to look the donation way, of all the donations that were made of PPEs, for whom were they? Would you not assume that they then were for medical professionals and practitioners then to don when they were either taking care of those who are suspected to be ill or those who then have already been found to be positive?
Let's
So
even
you have
say
to
that
ask
those
the
ones
question that where did
are
it come from?
consumables and they're already consumed.
Okay, let's assume that
because
they're
it's a
finished.
one-off. Right?
Okay, let's assume that they're finished. It's done.
It's a single-use PPE.
You must ask yourself. No. I'm talking about the mass number that then should have been dispersed around, because we saw that initially there was the hue and cry that came from these quarters where they said, you know what, we are downing our tools, not because we're not being paid, but because we don't have protective gear, and we will not be able to put ourselves at risk, our lives at risk, because there's the lack of this provision.
Yep.
So now here we are again, and we have the same professionals, even at some point, being asked to buy them. To buy them, then you have to ask yourself, from whom? And this is a public facility of individuals providing a public service. So I think it's I don't know if sad even begins to describe what this looks like. But the truth of the matter is that the people who are being asked to be on the front line are not protected. How are they supposed to work?
Then there's something else. One, they also say that the numbers are really not adequate. And as a result of this, there's something called burnout. They're getting to the point where they cannot actually function in any productive way. Now, we've heard stories, operative word here, stories of how the government has planned to employ X number of health workers.
Been in the process of employing X number of workers. 1 billion shillings out of the universal health coverage.
We were
kitty
told
was going to this, and then we also saw.
So let me ask the question: How many have been employed so far?
How many have been employed so far? It's
And
been
where have they been deployed?
Each county is employing its own medical workers. How many have they employed? Each of them. To help us unravel this story, let's speak to the Secretary General of the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union, KMPDU, Dr. Mwachonda Chibanzi. Dr. Mwachonda, good morning.
Good morning to you, Eric. How are you?
Salama kabisa. Thank you very much for speaking to us, and welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you, too, for the opportunity.
So, Doc, we've just done the introduction and said we have our frontline workers are exposed to COVID-19 and the kind of response that your people are, putting out in the frontline. Just paint for us a picture of what's a country like in terms of medical practitioners.
Well, I think the first thing to appreciate is the fact that we have an acute shortage of healthcare workers across in this country, and this is a situation that has been for decades. If you go back as far back as 2007 and studies done up until now, we've never really achieved the requisite number with regards to doctor population ratio and healthcare worker population ratio. So that puts us in a position where COVID-19 happened across the globe and it came to our country. And as a result of that, then what needed to be done was to redistribute the workforce that is already at shortage to try and respond to COVID-19 and also respond to the other normal ailments and diseases that actually present to facilities. So that is where we started from. And from that point then, you get to a point that we see the government, yes, making pledges that they're going to employ more healthcare workers. We've seen all those advertisements done. But unfortunately, 4 months into the pandemic response, we are yet to see any healthcare worker additional deployed to reinforce the workforce that is currently on the ground. And as a result of that, we are also seeing several of our colleagues getting infected and getting exposed every single day, going into isolation and quarantine. As of 22nd of July, which is 5 days ago, we were at 558. And this is almost 4% of the total disease burden in the country. And for every healthcare worker who goes into isolation and quarantine, they leave a gap. It means the ones who remain have to work much more than what they normally do. And all this response, then additionally add onto it the issues that we already have with regards to salary delays, with regards to them not promoting the healthcare workers and putting them in their respective job groups. As a result of that, you're already having specialists who are really needed in this response, resigning from public service and just opting to go into private practice where they can actually get their terms and conditions of work and of employment sorted out. So all this paints a very grim picture of how the health workforce is handling this pandemic. And I can assure you that if in the next 2 weeks, and we're already seeing that tussle between the national and county governments, we're already seeing the issue around the division of revenue bill and the Council of Governors coming out saying that they will delay July salaries. I can assure you that in the next 2 weeks, what you're going to see is you're going to see a blow up of the frustration of the healthcare workers, and they will simply just go back home and sit and wait for them, because you cannot be offering your services and the next thing is you're not even assured of if you get infected, where you're getting treated, because that's another issue. Where you're getting treated. Secondly, is if you die, we've already lost one of our owners as a doctor. We've lost 8 healthcare workers. And 80% of our health workforce is of the young population, which means they have very young families that need to be taken care of. So if you're dying and you're not assured of any compensation, you're not assured that your family will be taken care of, it gets to a point where you basically say, and the only way to protect myself and my family is to just stay home.
Doctor, if I may ask you a question.
Yes.
Is there any... first of all, good morning and thank you for coming.
Morning to you.
Would you say from your knowledge that there is any county in this country that could be said to have at least taken care of their health workers in any appreciable manner?
At this point in time, I wouldn't say yes at all. Because yes, they could have implemented, perhaps let's say that they pay their salaries on time, which is a very basic thing, but majority of counties will always pay their salaries late. With regards to treatment, you'll find that as we speak today, by the way, I know a number of counties that have not remitted that statutory deduction of NHIF. And I know a number of doctors who've had to pay out of pocket because their family members, their children, or they themselves were sick. And as a result of that, the insurance cannot pay for it because the remittance has not been remitted.
I have to ask you, Dr. Chibanzi, at this point, and I'll also say good morning.
Good morning.
Why? Okay, there were certain pronouncements that were made. Insurance was one of the big ones for medical practitioners, especially after the onset of COVID. And then after that, there was the promise that healthcare workers would be hired. Now, obviously, this has not happened because we're here lamenting about this at this point. Has there been any kind of query made in terms of why this has not happened on both counts, on the insurance aspect and as well as the employment or the hiring aspect?
Okay. So I think for us, we've been following this pretty much. And even initially, when the pronouncement was made and the initial meetings were set up, we got invited and we sat in and made very good proposals. But after the proposals, what has happened is that the people who have been tasked to make sure that this actually happens, I'd say slept on the job. And I'm saying this because they took a lackluster approach after that. And that is why we're where we are today. So even as we make inquiries on this matter, I can assure you that those proposals are seated somewhere. Now, as per last week, the discussion that was having is where are we getting the money? So you ask yourself, and that's the point, are we all on the same page with regards to the COVID-19 response? Because as healthcare workers, we are willing to work and make sure that we take care of Kenyans. But the people who are supposed to take care of us are handling things in a non-emergency situation manner.
So basically, they're just blasé. Now, just going back to the issue of the hiring of doctors. I mean, this was announced a long time ago by the president. Budget was already there. It was just, moving budget from one area to another. Parliament already played its part. And counties had already announced the vacancies. The interviews were happening. And I've heard you say that no county so far has hired an extra medical worker.
Yeah, put it that way, and mostly because what happened is that when the pronouncement was made is that the Public Service Commission at national level was tasked to do that. Mm-hmm. And counties said no, healthcare is devolved. Yep. And then we got into that tussle of this is our role, this is our role. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that push and pull, the tug of war between those two levels of government has resulted to where we are. And at some point, we have to be alive to the fact that also counties, when led to hire, quickly look at your surname. It's about tribalism here. Mm. And these are things that we've been painfully going through as healthcare workers ever since devolution began. Mm. That if you do not belong to this county, go back to your home county and seek
employment there.
Dr. Chibanzi, I've got to come back to this because I'm looking at a story, and if I look at the date of it specifically, the date is April 2nd, right? Government has begun hiring of 5,000 skilled health workers at county level in a process expected to be completed in the next 7 days. According to the CS Ministry of Health, he had said that counties had submitted their requirements to the national government, and these positions, like Eric said previously, had already been advertised. So level 4 to level 6 hospitals were recruiting at least 1,000 health workers, meaning that they would have an additional 6,000 medical workers in the fight against COVID. Are we saying that absolutely none of this has happened? Because according to them, county commissioners, head teachers of boarding schools, and those in different parts of the country were moved according to population in order to create space, for example, for medical. So that meant that if these spaces were created, then there were individuals then who were working in those spaces.
Yeah. So the reality, and that's the reality, that we as healthcare workers, we know ourselves at work, and you'd actually appreciate that so-and-so has come as part of the reinforcement. Mm-hmm. So the reality on the ground is that we are not seeing these additional healthcare workers. Mm. So despite, yes, and rightfully so, that all advertisements were done in April, the doctors who went for the interviews in May keep calling me every day. How far are we? Where are we? Have people been hired and perhaps have been left out? And I'm like, no, because even when I follow up, I'm told that no, we are waiting for the report of the interviews done in May, and now we are in July.
These interviews are being conducted by the county public service boards.
The interviews that got 2 levels of hiring.
Right.
Counties were allowed to hire the additional staff based on their resources, and then there was the national response to COVID, the ones that were supposed to be brought on board as part of the universal health coverage and repurposed for COVID-19. And then secondly, the ones that were 6 months contracts advertised for COVID-19 at national level for distribution across all the 47 counties. And up until now, none is on the ground. That is the reality of the situation.
And there is no end in sight to when this will, you have no indication at all when you're going to have the extra medical workers.
The best I've gotten so far as of Thursday last week was perhaps this week they will give their reports and consider now the hiring.
Consider the hiring. Okay.
Let me ask you another question, Doctor. This one I want your opinion. Huh?
Yes.
Do you think that health should have been devolved?
In the honest opinion, the idea to devolve healthcare was not done in a way that was meant to hamper our health services. But in reality, knowing the country we're in, and seeing how all this has played out, and the fact that now the health of our people in a county is dependent on the political will of one individual who is the governor.
Yeah.
So if he gives healthcare priority and decides he wants to fix healthcare for it to work, it will work. But if the governor decides, I do not want health to be as a matter of priority in me, and I'll give you good examples. We've seen the issues in Kirinyaga County. We've seen the issues in Laikipia County, who till date amidst this pandemic, fired healthcare workers, and they do not want to reinstate them back, despite even courts pronouncing healthcare should not be devolved at this point in time. It should be a central function that is coordinated across all the counties, and especially with regards to human resources for health management, to standardize and to centralize that with regards to terms and conditions of work and honoring agreements signed between the unions in the health sector and the government. And that is why...
For us and others, Doctor... sorry, go ahead.
And that is why we say that, one, a Health Services Commission for standardized management across, where we do not have to deal with the tribalism issue, where health workers can work even in the most remote of areas, in Turkana, in Wajir, in the border counties, in Lamu. With that, then, we would have achieved what we want to achieve with regards to healthcare services in this country.
I think it's important, Dr. Chibanzi, to paint a picture of what it would look like if health was not devolved, but it was then directed from a central government. What would it look like, and how would it be different from what we see right now?
Yeah, so one will be easier with regards to implementation of some of the policy directions from the national level of government. We've seen the universal health coverage agenda being set forth, but that agenda is dependent also on the counties, which claim some level of semi-autonomy. And that means that if you're not all in the same page, then you cannot move all the bricks at once. There are obstacles in place. So if we had it at a central level, it means that we are equipping all healthcare facilities with different equipment at the same time. You implement that across board. If you're doing needs assessment for the human resource requirement, you basically look at the resources across the country, look at the gaps, do the budgeting, and get that from the exchequer. And when it comes to hiring, employment, deployment, you basically just move with it. And a good example is the Teacher Service Commission. They hire up to 5,000 teachers a year. In the health sector right now, that is not possible. And that is why you're seeing 3 months down the line, we are still indicating we've done 5,000, but they are not on the ground. And when it regards to issue of equipment and medical supplies, what are the basic medical supplies required in each facility? What are the essential drugs required? So each facility, and you remember before devolution, you used to have what you call facility improvement funds, the FIF fund, and you used to have the board of management in the facilities that would sit, do the needs for the hospital. Whatever revenue generated from the hospital is used directly to improve services in that facility. With the devolved system of governance, what has happened is that health funds go into the county revenue fund, and the governor can decide that 90% or 20% of this will not go to healthcare, take it elsewhere. Which now affects service delivery. So with regards to facilities and how they function, then there's now an obstacle with regards to the resources that are available there. And that is how it will look if we had facilities being able to do the management and ensure that services are improved in the various areas within that catchment area of the hospital, as opposed to now.
Dr. Chibanzi, I'd like us to take a quick break on this conversation and then come back and continue with it. We are speaking with Dr. Mwachonda Chibanzi. He is the Secretary General of the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union. We are dedicating the show today to COVID-19 and the country's preparedness and response to COVID-19, the pandemic. The president is meant to have a meeting today with all the 47 governors, and they'll be discussing the response of the government at all levels on what we are doing in COVID-19, but we also want to hear from the people who are our frontline soldiers, and these are the medical practitioners. What is happening on the ground? Dr. Chibanzi is painting a picture for us, telling us what's happening, what's not happening, which is really not a very good picture. But then let's come back and we'll find out what areas are working, what areas are not working. This is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on Spice FM and KTN Home, 25 minutes after 7. Keep it right here. The conversation continues.
Well, warming up ever so slightly in Nairobi at 13 degrees. Cloudy conditions, however, going to continue for most parts of the day. We'll see highs of 22 and lows of 13 today. In Njeri, 13 degrees is mostly cloudy. A shower expected in the afternoon. Highs of 21 and lows of 13. Nakuru at 14 degrees is mostly cloudy. There will be a sprinkle in the afternoon. Highs of 22 and lows of 13. Eldoret is partly cloudy at 12 degrees. Highs of 19 and lows of 12 with a wet afternoon forecast there as well. It's partly cloudy in Kisumu at 18 degrees. We'll see highs of 26 and lows of 18. And sunny conditions in Kakamega give way to partly cloudy conditions in the afternoon with highs of 24 and lows of 15. It's partly cloudy in Mombasa at 24 degrees. It's going to be wet this afternoon, however, highs of 28 and lows of 23. Malindi is partly cloudy at 24 degrees. Also will follow in fine form with showers later on, highs of 28 and lows of 24. Kampala is going to experience showers in the afternoon with highs of 26 and lows of 17. And it's going to be mostly cloudy in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania at 22 degrees currently. We'll see highs of 31 and lows of 22. It's 5 degrees in Johannesburg in South Africa. We'll see highs of 16 today and lows of 4, but it'll be a sunny day all through the crisp weather. In Lagos, 24 degrees and partly cloudy. We'll see highs of 29 and lows of 23 with showers expected for most parts of the afternoon. It's slow but moving along Mombasa Road this morning, all the way from Maradaima. We see that it's going to be held up just a little bit, but you will be actually fine. There was a lion spotting in Nairobi this morning from traffic on Langata Road, but I'm sure he's gone back into hiding. Kitengela, as we then join Mombasa Road, that should be fine as we see it. Let's look into industrial area where now that Lunga Lunga Road is open, at least the traffic is not as thick and heavy as it was before, but you should be fine getting to then Jogo Road on this side of the world, and then getting into the CBD from there as you approach the City Stadium roundabout will not be too much of a headache. All right, let's look at other parts. Coming in from Thika Road, getting into the CBD via Globe Cinema roundabout, not too crazy. Also getting in from Westlands, getting in and out of the CBD, not so bad either. We're heading right into traffic hour, so that looks like it's going to change in a bit. Don't forget, Spice FM KE is how you can reach us on Twitter. Let us know what it is that you see. We're going to take a look into Mombasa and Kisumu as parts of the country and see what it looks like this morning for traffic.
In about 5 seconds, it will be 7:30. This is a situation. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on Spice FM 94.4 Nairobi, 87.9 in Mombasa, 102.5 in Kisumu, Nakuru 96.0, 96.7 in Eldoret, 90.9 in Njeri, and Malindi 97.7. We live stream the show as well, www.spicefm.co.ke, as well as on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And the account is SpiceFMKE. This morning also, 7 o'clock up to 9 o'clock, we are live on KTN Home, speaking with Dr. Mochonda Chibanzi. He is the Secretary General of the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union, talking about the frontline workers in this fight against COVID-19. Dr. Chibanzi has already told us, okay, the president announced in April that we're going to recruit new medical workers to help in the fight against COVID in various cadres. None of them has been employed yet. Then there was the issue, and you alluded to this, Dr. on insurance and allowances, because we know that the government already announced that we're going to come up with a package that would at least give you some sort of comfort, and all medical workers working some sort of comfort that their families would be covered, them and their families that get some sort of insurance cover. Has this been actualized?
Yeah. So the issue of insurance, I'd like to say that where we are currently is that, as remember before devolution, we had what we call the NHIF comprehensive cover, civil servants comprehensive cover. That is a quite comprehensive package in regards to treatment of civil servants. Now, as we speak, and that is the starting point, is that only 20 of the 47 counties across the country I basically enrolled in this comprehensive cover scheme. And what has happened is that the remaining 27 have either procured private insurance, which does not offer comprehensive cover for the workers. And with that, then, we have a number of our healthcare workers on insurance, private insurance, that has now indicated that it is actually happening and not paying for COVID-related exposure and treatment for any of the healthcare workers.
Yeah.
And then we equally have in the counties healthcare workers who have been hired on temporary terms who do not have any form of insurance. Yes, so the directive was set, but as we speak, and that's where we are. And I think at some point, the reality is that how we move as a country moving forward with regards to COVID-19 response is purely dependent on the political decisions and choices that our political players make.
Yep.
Because if they do not take us in the right direction with regards to taking care of healthcare workers, then there's nothing we're doing here, because the central core response of COVID-19 is not the beds, is not the equipment, is not the testing, is not the reagents, it is the healthcare workers. Yeah.
And they're all exposed. 558 as of 5 days ago, right? The ones that have tested positive to COVID-19. Yeah. Then unfortunately, we've lost 8 healthcare workers so far to COVID. And this exposes what you're saying. I mean, we have people in the front line and they're feeling that they're not protected in terms of PPEs. This is an issue that KMPDU and other unions within the healthcare were raising from the very beginning. How are we doing so far?
Yeah. So with regards to PPEs, I'd start and say that I'd like to appreciate two specific agencies, rather, that have really come in handy here. One is the Kenya COVID Fund that was set up. Remember, this is a private and the corporate entity.
It's a Harambe.
Yes.
Where all of us are contributing something.
Precisely, yes. And then secondly is Equity Foundation, Dr. James Mwangi, who out of his own initiative donated over 300 million just to this to this cause of personal protective equipment. What that has helped us move is that because the COVID Fund and Equity are focused on the designated COVID-19 facilities that are about 72 in the country as per our first distribution to the facilities.
Yeah.
That is the level 3 PPE, that is the full kit PPE. But unfortunately, equally, is that now we are getting sentiments of the Council of Governors and the Ministry of Health to some extent said COVID Fund has distributed PPEs.
So that means that that role has been taken up. Remember, this was meant to supplement the efforts of the government. Then secondly, where we are and where we have a big problem right now is all other facilities across the country. These ones that require level 2 PPE, that is the N95 mask, surgical masks, surgical gown, and goggles or face shields. And there's a big problem because we're talking about level 3 facilities, level 2 facilities, level 1 facilities. And remember that at this point, we are at community spread of the disease. And with a big proportion of the community being asymptomatic. So patients present to the facilities with other illnesses or rather other symptoms. But at some point after taking care of the patient, your index of suspicion rises and you're like, let's test for COVID in this patient. And COVID turns positive. The patient has been in the facility for perhaps the last 2 or 3 days. Mission or the patient came, and because there was no, out of the screening, you basically just had your surgical mask on. What has that resulted in? The increasing number of infections across the healthcare workers.
What should happen here? When you talk about the level 2, just basically just for everybody else's understanding, what is a level 2 facility?
So from level 1, we have what we call the the community dispensaries. Then level 2, you have the dispensaries and the health centers, which now move into level 3 facilities. And then you have level 4 facilities that are what we now currently see as what used to be district hospitals. Now we're seeing them as county and sub-county hospitals. Then you have the level 5, that is what used to be provincial hospitals that are now also somehow county hospitals. And then you have the level 6, which is our national referral facility. You have Kenyatta University, you have Kenyatta National Hospital, and you have Mwiti Referral Hospital. So what we call mashinani.
The mashinani facilities are what we're discussing here, where the healthcare worker should be having the basics, what you've just described. So where should these be coming from, and how often should this be replenished at every facility?
Yes. So the PPE is basically, you're looking at the number of healthcare workers in that facility, the requirements per day or per week. So essentially, if you have a stock, you should have a stock for every week to cover the healthcare workers. And at the end of the month, and this is based on you, because you're also monitoring the use. You need to ensure that there's rational use of PPEs, which is something that healthcare workers are keen on, because we understand it is paramount to our protection. So by the time the month is ending, or every 2 weeks to every end of the month, you should have brought on board more PPEs for the healthcare workers, And that is where we are also seeing that there is some laxity, because the reality, and I speak to my colleagues who keep calling me and keep asking, is that we are being rationed. We are getting one surgical mask for use the entire day. It's not practical for a healthcare worker. Because you're performing procedures, you at some point need to change and get another one.
It would seem that these are things that are extremely obvious in terms of the operations of some of these things, even something as basic as, changing a mask. So then I have to ask then, who's responsible? Whose responsibility is it for the coordination of all of this to say that, all right, we've sent a number out to facilities and then we need more or we need an increase? Who's responsible for this?
So whoever is responsible is one at the facility level. You have what you call the managers, who now link up with the county and the sub-county teams to ensure that then the county provides resources for that you have procurement coming in, and that process is quite smooth. But there is a problem, because we know that when it comes to procurement in our country, and you're alive to that, is that then certain interests come into play. So the whole process of procurement gets delayed equally. Then secondly, what we are also getting is that because of the procurement interests, we are having substandard PPEs going to healthcare workers. And at this point, I'd also like to say that it's the responsibility of the government to ensure that they put very stringent quality and assurance measures. We should be seeing now that the locally manufactured PPEs that are standard is from these factories. But we're not seeing that. Because the same people who are manufacturing substandard have political connections that they use to
get this to the healthcare workers. And essentially what happens then is that you're not protecting the healthcare worker. You're basically exposing them because you're giving them substandard protective equipment.
Do you think there's enough? I mean, it's always a question, and the unique position at which you sit in, Dr. Chibanza, do you think that there's enough? Because it would seem that, government has so many balls in the air at the same time. There's not enough money to get around. Is there enough to be able to give medical professionals, healthcare workers, what they need to be able to fight? Because like you said, without it, in a week or two, you're going to find some people rather stay home than come out to medical facilities and help Kenyans. It's that bad.
So with regards to whether it's enough or not, I think it is possible to put healthcare workers in a position where they feel appreciated and supported. So with N95 masks, which have to be imported, if you are provided, and let me tell you this, in April, when the Senate Ad Hoc Committee on COVID-19 was set up, we did a memorandum and we went and presented. And in that memorandum, we put what was projected personal protective equipment requirements for all healthcare workers. And the figures were they looked huge, but it was also the reality, around 8 million. But that was at the point in time where we were importing. The good thing is we have 7 factories now, out of us helping and taking our time to advise and make sure that whatever you're making is quality and standard. 7 factories that can produce majority of the PPEs locally. So that would mean that it should not be an issue of whether we have enough money or not, because one, you subsidize, you're producing it locally here, and the efforts should be towards funding to ensure that we protect our healthcare workers. So yes, there's a bit of this and how they're shared. But a substantial amount is equally going into paying per diems for people who are doing surveillance, per diems for people who are doing meetings. And the question in last, which is a moral question, is that this situation of a pandemic, should I be paid for sitting in a meeting, or should I let these monies go towards the response and take care of healthcare?
Yeah, go to the actual work that it should be doing instead of just talking about meetings. I mean, we keep discussing this here all the time. Government response and CT, I'm sure you heard this and you were like, okay, here we go again. It has been said, it has been put on paper, it has been announced by the president himself, but before that decision is actualized, to come to the implementation of the basic decisions that are pretty obvious to everybody, it never moves. It's because of all these push and pull, personal interests taking center stage in a time when you're fighting a pandemic. This is something that is threatening your own existence as a human being, and yet we're still having the back and forth fight, City.
The pandemic that we've had for the longest time was the HIV and AIDS pandemic. And I think what we accustomed our healthcare system to was other people taking care of it, or at least predominantly contributing to the taking care of it. Now, this one is smack in our faces. There's no running to any big daddy. Right. It's us and the disease. And yet, it isn't as though we don't have money, we do. But the problems that were once the province of Afia Center, that gave it the tag name
Afia House,
not Afia Center, that gave it the tag Mafia House, seems to have been devolved to the counties, because there seems to be an unbridled greed that does not pay heed whatsoever to anything that would actually help the common man. At least where health, since we're talking health, I'm just referring to health.
Yeah.
It's like someone takes specific care to neglect it.
Deliberately.
Yes. It's like there's effort being made to sabotage and to ensure that the healthcare center doesn't work. Because if money is available and you know what you should do with it, and it continuously doesn't get done, so what are we to conclude?
What is actually, even more worrying, and Dr. Chibanzi, you can still contribute to this as we continue with the conversation, is we are seeing the numbers rising. We are seeing the numbers now across the county rising, and we know that everywhere in the country, people do not first of all go to a level 5. No. They will go to the nearest health facility.
Yes.
All right. And if it's a community transmission, that means that nearest health facility, the healthcare worker ought to be protected from that level.
Most certainly.
And then this is where we are seeing that this is not happening. The government has, neglected its bit, abrogated its responsibility, said, we created a Harambee fund. That Harambee fund is doing its job. This rich man here has money, has donated money, so those ones are doing well. So the government takes a backseat. What nonsense is this?
You will find that those health facilities, the basic health facilities, will have one genuinely overworked and extended healthcare worker. And if that person should fall sick,
Finish.
there are no services being offered.
That's it. That's what it means, Dr. Chibanzi, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen the tale of that healthcare worker with over 30 years experience in public health in Wajir, who died over the weekend. There was no oxygen.
No.
In those.
In the facility.
I missed that one.
Yeah, so the he over 30 years experience in public health. He was responding to the pandemic as part of the rapid response team. He got sick. He required, because he was aged. He wasn't a young healthcare worker. So he was aged. He required treatment. He required oxygen. From that point in Wajir, getting the test result of COVID means it takes a week, because then they have to be flown to Nairobi somehow and brought back to Wajir. And when his disease severity now became worse, his condition worsened, oxygen was required. There was no oxygen available. Even the ambulance to transport him, at least from that level facility to a higher level facility, it was still dysfunctional, and that's the state. So essentially, we lost a healthcare worker who was failed by the system that he is working in. Yeah.
So, and this also will translate to everybody else. I mean, you can imagine if we had an increase in the number of people who are getting infected with COVID, and the government has told us this many times that the people who are highly vulnerable are also likely to be found in the rural areas. That means that their nearest health facility is this level 2, level 3.
Yeah.
So if we get an increased number of people seeking these services and needing these basics like oxygen or like an ambulance to transport them, and they don't get it at these level facilities, then we are going to have a problem on our hands.
Absolutely.
But of interest, I'm sure the good doctor can explain this in greater detail. Right now, we have a fairly good idea of what an extreme COVID case is and what happens before it gets to that. So it isn't as though we're not completely in the dark here. Now, yet, if someone is unwell and you can see the progression, surely any healthcare worker who's worth his weight in salt would understand this is what they need to do. But if the system doesn't have what is required, it doesn't matter how much effort that person actually puts in.
Yeah, it's useless.
Yes.
So, Dr. Now the government, the president is going to be having a conversation with the county governors, in which they're going to have that same conversation again. You know, we are prepared, we are ready to handle this, or we are not prepared because we have not received any money. From where you sit as KMPDU and your own basic projections in the next coming months, looking at the increase in the number of COVID-19 cases, the increase in the number of deaths, what would you, if you were called into that meeting between the president and the governors, what would you tell them?
Yeah, so the first thing is, let me start with the healthcare workers, because to me they are the central to this response. The recommendations for healthcare workers would basically be on occupational safety and health. One is to make sure that COVID-19 is included in the second schedule of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, because that will now direct compensation. Create an occupational injury and disease fund, which is a proposal we put forth to the Senate ad hoc committee, so that this occupational injury and disease fund will be able to compensate the healthcare workers. Supply of adequate and quality PPEs, that all local manufacturers be subject to the very stringent quality control measures as specified by the Ministry of Health specifications on PPEs and the Kenya Bureau of Standards. So let us have it made public that these are the only ones that can provide and are producing quality PPEs. Then provision of adequate and quality PPEs in all the facilities across the country. The level 3 for the designated COVID-19. Let COVID Fund and Equity Group Foundation supplement the government's effort, and the government equally takes up its responsibility of providing these PPEs. And then thirdly, to reduce the cost of care to Kenyans in the private sector. Waiver of duty and VAT for the testing kits, reagents, personal protective equipment, so that this will reduce the cost of care to Kenyans seeking healthcare in private facilities. Provision of group life for the healthcare workers and priority testing for all healthcare workers. That has to be done. It's not even a negotiable issue at this point in time. With regards to welfare, ensure that all counties procure the NHIF comprehensive care for all healthcare workers. Counties should timely disburse salaries to their healthcare workers, promote their healthcare workers, and offer psychosocial support, and then employ more healthcare personnel. And the political support to frontline healthcare workers by the political players is to basically adhere to the Ministry of Health guidelines and mitigation measures and prevention of COVID-19. That's from the health workforce perspective. Now, with regards to equipment, oxygen supply in all counties. We already have doctors who've come up with very good proposals on how a fully functional oxygen plant can function in a county. This needs to be considered because it will offer care to Kenyans, not just for COVID, but even in the long term, for anyone who requires oxygen. With regards to the bed capacity, yes, improve our capacity on that and ensure that each county now has a separate COVID-19 with adequate capacity to ensure that with that, then now you have people to set them up and then, of course, employ more healthcare personnel. So that covers infrastructure, equipment, health workforce, and then budgetary provision for COVID-19 should focus more on the response. That is, to ensure that all the requisite building blocks of the system are in place as opposed to administrative function.
It's obvious to get a lot of these things done, Dr. Chibanzi, is that, somebody ought to be listening and sit up and actually do what is required. Because, we can agitate for it and say quite a number of things over time. But unless somebody actually does, take the step, then it would be very difficult to have some of these things done. Your predecessor often said that one of the only ways to get government to listen was to strike. And he said that...
you want the doctors to strike now?
No. That's not... Wait now, let me finish the statement.
Ignore Eric and
I'm ignoring Eric.
You're saying.
So he said one of the only ways to get them to understand this was to strike. And I'm asking at this point in time, what would ring a little bit louder in the ears of those who needed to get these things done? Because it's not just the country that's running after COVID now. Medical practitioners are as well.
Yeah, so what used to be said still stays true to that. And I've had these sentiments that you have to be more militant. And you're looking at, yes, we will strike, but that's going to have an effect because it will affect Kenyans. And we don't want to have this situation because the pandemic is actually a crisis already.
Yeah.
That is why we've really restrained ourselves as a union with regards to the issue of going on strike. But when the rubber meets the road, and that's what I was saying in the next 2 weeks, if nothing substantive is done, then that will be the only option. Then perhaps people will now start to address the issue. Yeah.
Perhaps the government will listen.
Yeah.
Dr. Mwachonda Chibanzi, thank you very much for speaking to us, the Secretary General of the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union. We wish you all the best as you continue pushing for this. And of course, let's wait and see what comes out of State House today after that meeting between the President and the governors.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we are hoping that they will come up with the substantive measures.
Asante sana. It's a Situation Room is Kenya's biggest conversation. This conversation continues on Spice FM, broadcasting from Nairobi to Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, Malindi, and worldwide on www.spicefm.co.ke. Also broadcasting on KTN Home this Monday morning. Good morning. Let's take a quick break. It's 5 minutes to 8 o'clock. Three minutes to 8 o'clock. This conversation continues. Today, we are discussing COVID-19 and the government's response to COVID-19. KMPDU says, look, we've been promised, things have been said, but nothing is moving. Doctors, it's quite shocking to hear that doctors who were supposed to have been employed have not yet been employed. I mean, the medical workers, rather, because it's all cadres of medical workers who were supposed to have been employed since April. This hasn't happened. I mean,
I'm very surprised. I'm very surprised.
I don't understand how.
I don't understand because truly, when the president
and there was a report actually a couple of weeks back, which indicated the counties that had employed X number so far.
Well, you know what? We were also told that there were counties that were ready with 300 beds each. So again, it could be replica of the same idea, whereby, all right, we need to feed this information to the general public and they'll keep quiet, right? They'll make a little bit of noise, they'll be rumblings, they'll be done. What you need is a report, let people know what seems to be, and then you can carry on. Nobody's going to make noise. But unfortunately, things always come to the surface.
What they're forgetting is now the national government is auditing these things. The national government may have been told people have been employed, or they may have told themselves they have employed people simply because they have interviewed people.
My question
and I guess that's what was happening.
My question is, when the president made this announcement and he talked about the 1 billion, because he made this announcement on the same day.
Yep.
When he talked about the 1 billion that was going to be removed from universal health care, and then was going to be now dedicated then to medical insurance for health workers specifically. He also mentioned on the same day that there was going to be another amount set for the hiring of
medical workers.
For workers across the country.
Numbers of workers that
right?
they wanted to employ.
Exactly.
Yes.
My question, though, then is, everybody then is assuming that this process has started because you hear the president speak and you get to work, right?
Yeah, and you see in the dailies,
that all right.
Advertisements have been placed.
Yes, county commissioners, chiefs, whatever, are getting to work and they're being told about this, that, the other thing that needs to be done. My question, though, then is that, because this is it, were funds then released for these exercises to continue?
You see, funds is salary.
I understand.
So unless someone has already been hired, then the salary is not going to be paid out to someone.
Exactly my point. If it's being reported in the public that people have actually been hired, and if people are hired and working, they're being paid. Is it not?
Yeah.
Whether they're ghost or not is not your problem. You've been told that people are working and they've been hired, so that means they're being paid. So that means at some point money had been released. Now we're coming to hear today that nothing has actually been done.
You actually just can't say they've been hired. Government reports. You have to send a report.
There has got to be a lot of proof that this has happened. Anyway,
Yes.
coming to the top of the hour, this conversation continues. It's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, 8 o'clock.
All right, don't use Moranga Road if you're headed to town from Thika Road. It's an absolute mess this morning. There's traffic in both directions and it's absolutely cray-cray. We still have the issues in Matatus, guys. Be one of those who decides not to use those Matatus that are already filling to capacity. So we see that there's no social distancing in Matatus. There's no sanitizing. There's no fumigation. And so there's a problem. And we can see that this morning. Matatus filled to capacity. Don't get in. Or if you're in one and you see there's actually full, get off. That would be the thing to do. All right. Unfortunately, there was a multiple car accident on Mombasa Road this morning, and that's affecting some traffic. Hit and run driver arrested after causing that accident, and unfortunately, people have been injured. We're waiting for the police to come in and sort that out. So you need to be careful as you approach General Motors and then moving down towards Airtel on Mombasa Road this morning. Take it very easy, guys. In Westlands, right around ABC Place, again, the police seem to be working extra hard this morning. Another cause of an accident this morning has then been waylaid by police. It seems that there's a mass exodus of people leaving the city this morning. That is what is being reported. Outbound on Thika Road, quite some traffic this morning, so you want to be aware of that. That is happening. Spice FMKE, let us know what you see, guys. If it gets crazy in your neck of the woods, give us a shout on Twitter. Let's see how we can help or send you in a good direction.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating
2.5
insights
minutes,
about the state
coming up
of
to
the
3
nation.
minutes of
This
8 o'clock.
is a talk
Thank you very
radio.
much for tuning in to the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Nairobi 94.4, Mombasa 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, Eldoret 96.7, 90.9 in Njeri, and Malindi 97.7. Also on KTN Home for the next 1 hour as well, and broadcasting on www.spicefm.co.ke. We are discussing COVID-19 response today. The president is going to be having a meeting, a summit with all the governors of the republic, and they will see what is it that the counties have done. And one of the most damning reports has been released by a team commissioned by the president to actually do an actual audit of the preparedness and all the measures that have been put in place by counties. That has told us what the counties were saying, that, many of the counties, only how many counties did not have a capacity?
Only how many counties did? 5.
No, initially.
The
Initially,
the
26.
No,
26.
no. It's 21 who hadn't met the threshold. 26 had.
So from the report by the Council of Governors, 26 counties have already met the minimum 300 bed
Yes.
threshold set aside for COVID. Not that your county has 300 beds in hospitals.
No.
Or even counting all the beds in the county, including families and hotels and lodgings. No, specific COVID-19.
You have to specify. Huh? Yeah.
Specific. And then this report comes out, And it shows that only 5 counties have met that threshold. 5 counties
5.
out of 47. That means 42 counties basically haven't met this threshold of 300 bed capacity.
If what I've been hearing is also true, the government has now given them the okay to use schools or learning institutions.
From the very beginning, this was actually a plan already.
But they have been given permission. So the issue of the need to even build doesn't arise because schools exist, which means the structures exist.
Yep. It's setting aside a facility that can sort you out in terms of
Yes,
COVID.
because you need a place.
Yep.
Despite that,
Only 5 have met this. And those 5 are Mombasa, Murang'a, Machakos, which one? Which others?
Wasingishu is what they said, and Kiambu. Yeah, those are 5.
Only.
Yes.
even,
Wasingishu.
even Makueni hasn't.
No, Makweni has. Sorry, so those are the 5: Machakos, Makweni, Kiambu, Wasingishu, and
Mombasa.
Mombasa. Yeah, according to this report.
The rest are talking to the birds.
So that is just the basic. And remember, on the what date was it in June when the president said, "All right, I'm listening to the advice by the medical think tank."
6th of June.
Yeah, when they said, "What we are going to do is we're going to continue an extension of all the cessation of movement and everything else, so that we allow counties to catch up, those that haven't caught up, and then they have the 30 days, and we'll be having weekly summits to discuss their progress and see what kind of support we need to give the counties, what they need to do to up their game." So many days down the road, we are still talking about counties not having met that basic bed capacity. So everything else, when you talk about the medical workers, when you talk about PPEs, when you're talking about testing capacity, and also how they organize, because one of the critical issues here is testing. We know that the labs are not in every county, but we know that we need to test at every county. So how are we going to get the samples from this county? How are we going to transport them to a lab in a different county? How are we going to bring the results back? How are we going to do the contact tracing? All that is something that ought to be very clear to everybody. If it's going to take you 14 days to get results, surely what are you talking about?
You'll be
So
dead.
somebody has come to a health facility, and when the doctor is basically going through asking them the questions, they realize, I think I need to do a COVID-19 test here. Do the COVID-19 test. It waits for some time before it goes to the lab. You wait for results before they come back. 7 days have lapsed, especially now for this health worker who died in Wajir. 7 days later is when they were receiving the results.
Not very useful, is it?
What kind of response is that, and what are we talking about?
And remember, this is now emergency. So 7 days emergency response, really.
These are definitely the things that should be taken. Look, not the PR or the, good face, which I guess was what PR is, that is going to be put out there when giving reports. But these are the things that should be taken into consideration during these deliberations that are being had today. The real state of things on the ground, how it actually looks like. If you want to use that one health worker in Wajir as an example of what really takes place, because they normally say if you have an example, that means that it is indicative of what the rest of the situation is.
Yeah.
It cannot be that just out of the blue, that it's just for this one individual that test results came 7 days later. You got to assume that that is the way things happen normally.
Well, the counties are on the spot right now, and we are discussing what counties have actually done to prepare themselves. Let's speak to one of the people who are instrumental in helping the counties prepare, starting from their own county. This is the County Executive Committee Member for Health in Makueni, Dr. Andrew Mulwa. Dr. Mulwa is also the chairman of all the CECs for Health countrywide. They have a forum for all CECs for Health. He also sits at the National Task Force on COVID-19 response. Dr. Mulwa, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Salama kabisa. Welcome to the Situation Room once again, this time on a virtual hot seat.
Thank you very much for the opportunity hosting me. I hope to share insights onto what's happening in our country on COVID-19 preparedness.
Great. We are really prepared for that. Let's start with Makueni. How prepared is Makueni?
Let me start by saying if anyone said they are 100% prepared, they would be lying. But there is a level of preparedness that you can say you are substantially prepared.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I feel we confuse ourselves when we give ourselves numbers that are based on epidemiologic modeling, and we stick to that. Like, for example, the 300 bed capacity that we have given ourselves across the country is a preparedness, yes, but that is only for isolation, and will obviously and is not enough if we are to get the peak of the epidemic. And therefore, when I say Makueni already has more than 300 beds, in actual fact, we have 312, where 300 are normal isolation and 12 are critical care beds. Then it will be easy for anyone looking at Makueni from the 300 and say Makueni is indeed ready.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, from what we have seen from this disease, 300 is a drop in the ocean.
So you can
we are
imagine, Dr. Muga, you can imagine our chagrin now when we look at other counties, and because I mean, you also sit in a unique position where you're basically chairing over the rest in the country, right? So how then does this relate if it's a drop in the ocean and some people have been able to pass? For those who've not?
Yeah, and it's still, it's a big issue because you're wondering, okay, so you're talking about 47 counties. You're talking about at least giving yourselves this bare minimum that you say, this is what we're going to do. We are going to at least bring ourselves to a level of 300. We know that if the numbers were to get worse, it's going to get worse. If the numbers remain below this, it's going to be doable. And the question that you're asking, Nduh, is how?
How then do we reconcile if other counties have not been able to get even to some 100, some 150?
Can I begin by saying we need to give credit where it's due, and 300, I say, is just but a number that has been arrived at after some scientific modeling, and we also must appreciate where counties are coming from. I think in the month of March, I was in this very hot seat, and we were talking about county preparedness, flights were coming in, and all that. At that point, the numbers that we were working with as a county, as a country, were between 10 and 15 beds per county. We now have counties with 300. We have counties with 270. This is work in progress. Even as like I mentioned, even as I speak now, in Makueni, I am working on increasing that capacity from the 312 in the first phase, moving to 500, and in another phase, moving to 800, depending on how the epidemic hit the county. And therefore, I think the point that I'm trying to drive home is it's not just a number and say 500, say 300. It is where our counties are not equal. Counties are not equal. We are not coming from the same background. We are not equally resourced. There is more than the bed, because having the bed is just one thing. But there is more than the bed. You need the human resource capacity to run. You need the PPEs. You need the equipment. You need the physical beds. You need the space to do this. And the physical infrastructure to hold 300 beds is not easy. There are counties that have gone for tended facilities. There are counties that have KMTCs that have been able to accommodate. There are all sorts of things across the counties. But I want to share that I feel the counties are working towards attainment of some level of preparedness. How did it come from 5 beds? No county has
Dr. Muga, there's something that is wrong with the line. We lack some clarity. We'd like to call you back so we can see whether we'll have a bit better of a line. Let's continue with this conversation when Dr. Muga comes back. But you see what he's starting. He's premising his discussion on. He's saying, look, preparedness is not just a number. And it makes a lot of sense. It's not just saying the 300 and therefore those 300, now you put your feet up in the air and say, well, we're good to go. There's everything else that goes with it. There is the healthcare workers. There's the provision of PPEs. There's what we were talking about, even things like testing and knowing how you can deal with testing and taking the samples to the lab and getting the results back. There's contact tracing. All these things cumulatively talk about a county's preparedness.
Yes, but it's a piece of the puzzle that is important. If you had PPEs and all those things and you didn't have the space, what on earth would you do with all those things? So he is right in that sense. It is part of this big effort that we're supposed to make. But the preparedness to have the capacity is necessary, because then the conversation for what else is needed becomes viable. It says we have the space, but we don't have this, and we don't have this, and we don't have this.
So it's a starting point.
Yes. Let me give you an example. If, say, for instance, you said that there's a county hospital that has more doctors than it needs, that isn't actually even a bad thing.
It's a good problem.
It's a very, very good problem, because it means that you can spread out that help and more people can receive help simply because of the numbers of healthcare workers that they have. All right? But when you don't have the space to actually ensure that people who need the help to be housed or to be a bed for them to be put into or onto, then your problem is a big one. So it's the cart and the horse here. They're all important, but something has to come before the other. Yes. In an ideal situation, they should all come together. But we know
that's the thing with something like this, is that unfortunately you can't give one precedence over the other. There's so many things that need attention at the same time. So I guess that's one of the unique things when you're dealing with county bosses, as it were. Then they have or should have the wherewithal to be able to have a bird's eye view of all of this and say, this is one we've done, this is the other, it's been done. Or at least to a certain extent, this other thing has been done as well. It's necessary to look at all of them, and you can't tick off one and say, "Oh, we've done one thing well." Well, sorry, but nobody's going to give you points for that
but
one.
The question I would like to ask Dr. Muga when he comes back is simply this: has money been available for all these things, or has there been a demand for them and yet there's no money for them? Because yes, that's yet another problem.
So the money conversation again.
I must have the money conversation, because if money is available, what was it available for and in what quantities? Yes. Because we understood from the governor of Machakos how he skewed whatever money he had towards one particular purpose. Clear, it's understood. But did other counties also receive money?
I think it's also important for us to realize that the people who are giving these reports, like the ones who will give the report to the president today, they were fed information by people across, such as Dr. Muga and others, who said this and this and this fuels our decision.
Is what we've done.
And this is what we have done.
Yep.
So there must have been something that you have done that you then say we're adequate. With that is what you used to then say we are adequately prepared. Without which you wouldn't be able to say it.
Actually, the word adequately prepared isn't it. We have met the minimum threshold.
Yeah. There's a minimum threshold. I mean, this is what was given, the irreducible minimums, right? Remember, by the Brain Trust, some of the irreducible minimums is that as our bed capacity. Dr. Muga is back on the line. And this is what we are discussing. So you were saying, Dr. that there are very many other things that would add into this in completing the jigsaw puzzle. Bed capacity is an irreducible minimum.
Good. When you say irreducible minimum, I think I will put you into perspective. Let me speak of a county like Lamu and Tharaka Nithi, which are two counties that have not attained the minimum bed capacity.
Yep.
And we have been engaging these two counties, and the reality on the ground, you will never get 300 bed facilities in Lamu County unless you convert everything in Lamu County into a COVID-19 treatment center. There are other diseases that we have to deal with. We have to deal with normal maternal issues. We have to deal with malaria. We have to deal with diabetes, non-communicable diseases, basically. And therefore, it's the same for Tharaka Nithi, where when we began devolution, the highest facility which is what they call a level 4 or level 5, a county referral, was a health center. How do you expect Tarakaniti and another county is Nyandarua, for example? How do you expect them to have a 300-bed capacity if their normal bed capacity is not 300? So it's a question of now saying, yes, this is what we had projected for all of us to have 300-bed capacity. We have worked, and the reality is Makueni can get to 800-bed capacity. Machakos can get to 800-bed capacity. Will get to probably 120.
So what happens? What happens when you have more than 120 people needing care in Lamu?
That is exactly where I'm going to say we need to start thinking of, one, this is the county capacity. How do we ensure we have a regional capacity to first manage cases?
Doctor, how do you determine this capacity?
This capacity has been developed by epidemiologic modeling, which even for Lamu, if you look at the 300 bed, was an average. If you look at the epidemiologic modeling for Lamu were actually supposed to have. I'm giving this as an example.
Right, we understand.
So that we speak from a point of knowledge, we have Lamu, and I'm trying to retrieve the data for this. We have Lamu that as an allocation of let me give you for example the expected number of cases in Lamu is 86.
Expected number of
COVID-19 cases to be hospitalized at any one particular time is 86. But they have projected because we agreed on a number which is an average. When you look at a county like, for example, I go to Bomet. Bomet, they are expected to have 536 from the modeling that we are using, 536 cases. So would Bomet say they are ready because they have 300 bed capacity, while they have 536 hospitalizations? This 300, I'm saying, is not cast on stone. This is a figure that was being arrived at after scientific modeling, and therefore it is not the number that we should always say you must have this. If you have this, you are prepared. No.
However, it is the number. However, it is the number that was used to inform certain decisions that were made. So at that point, when these decisions were made, Dr. Mulwa, was there any kind of counter to say, all right, we understand, but these things would vary from county to county? Because, for example, let's say in Lamu, according to the modeling, it's 86 patients in a ward at any given time because of COVID, right? So what happens, peradventure, if more than 86 people get infected? And that's what they're using then to put their bed capacity in place.
That is exactly where I began this conversation for. That, yes, even when I reach 300 as Makueni, there will be, and of course, if we don't know what's called primary prevention, which is the most important thing in this COVID-19 crisis, is how do we sustain a primary prevention of the epidemic? We now, unlike the time that we got this epidemiologic modeling data, that there are now home-based care guidelines, which were not in existence at the time that this data was generated. And therefore, what that means is, yes, indeed, we have 300 bed capacity, but there are alternative ways which now exist. Then the question would be, for those counties, which is not the majority, will be ultimately, because will be maybe 5 or below counties that cannot achieve the 300 bed capacity. We ask ourselves, for these counties, how do we build their capacity?
What
Is
options
it
are there?
going through the tended facilities, and can we have them? And when you look at it, there is also another whole issue that no one is talking about the resource allocation.
Okay, so that was my next
yes,
question, Dr. Mulwa.
Yes.
Along those lines.
But I want to go to a
and
break.
yes,
I want to go to a break, Dr. Mulwa, and then we continue this conversation. Because now we are talking about practical versus, what's on textbook versus what is expected. And all these things inform a decision that is made that impacts an entire country and an entire country's response to an emergency. This is the situation. Room is Kenya's biggest conversation. Speaking to Dr. Andrew Mulwa, he is a CEC for Health in Makueni County and also the chairman of the National CEC's Forum for Health. And he's also a member of the task force on COVID-19. 25 minutes to after 8 o'clock. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. We are taking a quick break on Spice FM and KTN Home. We'll be back shortly.
All right, we're looking at mostly cloudy conditions in Nairobi at 14 degrees this morning. We'll see a high of 23 and lows of 13 through the day. In Njeri at 14 degrees, it's also mostly cloudy. We'll see showers in the afternoon with highs of 21. And in Nakuru, we'll see highs of 22 today with showers in the afternoon, partly cloudy conditions at 14 at the moment. It's mostly cloudy in Eldoret at 14 degrees, highs of 20 with showers later, high and lows of 12. Sunny conditions in Kisumu at 21 degrees, only partly cloudy conditions later with highs of 26 and lows of 19. It's sunny in Kakamega at 17 degrees, highs of 24 and lows of 16. In Mombasa, partly cloudy conditions at 24. There'll be a sprinkle in the afternoon with highs of 28 and lows of 23. 28 degrees the high and lows of 24 in Malindi today. Chances of showers also quite high. Let's take a look then into Kampala, where at 18 degrees, it's partly cloudy, highs of 26 and lows of 18 with wet conditions in the afternoon. It'll be partly cloudy in Dar es Salaam for most of the day, currently at 24 degrees. We'll see highs of 31 and lows of 22. In Johannesburg at 5 degrees, it's mostly sunny and sunny conditions will be there throughout the day with highs of 16 and lows of 6. And finally, for now, in Lagos, it's partly cloudy. At 24 degrees, we'll see highs of 29 and lows of 23 with a chance of rain throughout the day, well into Tuesday. Public transport seems to be directed from Thika Road, going towards Forest Road and Wangari Maathai Road. The question is, why is the other side of town being avoided? We'll look into that and find out why that could be, but probably no need to panic right now. Mombasa Road traffic today has been epic, and it probably will be that way for about another hour or so. Very slow moving from the airport exit. Traffic tailed back as far as the Mlolongo Way Bridge this morning, trying to get into the CBD. Other parts seem to have been given the all clear. Someone's taken an hour only to get from Kitengela to Kiambu. And the question is there a mass exodus from the Nairobi metropolitan area this morning? Either way, you want to be safe. Remember, the main issue that we're seeing this morning is that most public transport filled to capacity. Do not, if you can't. Spice of MKE, that's how you can reach us on Twitter.
Traffic.
coming up to 8:30. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. And the conversation continues with Dr. Andrew Muga. He is the CEC, the Minister for Health in Makueni County. He's also the chairman of the Forum for Health CECs countrywide, also a member of the task force that's dealing with COVID-19 pandemic. Well, Dr. Muga has, in his introduction, in his presentation, he was saying, look, there are some things that were set as, bare irreducible minimums, but then also there's situation on the ground and there's a reality on the ground and a very fluid situation. Looking at countries, at all the counties countrywide and the kind of epidemiological models that have been put in place by experts, you look at some counties are likely to have higher number of COVID-19 cases. So even talking about a 300-bed capacity for Makueni is still not enough. But Makueni, for instance, has reached the 300-bed capacity. They have 312 for critical care. Counties like Lamu, his example, is if, for example, the projections are showing that you're going to have about 87 people who will require treatment, then you also see, so do we want to dedicate a lot of our resources on going to 300, or do we want to deal with increasingly dealing with those that can require treatment? And then at the same time, between that time and now, there has been new rollout of the home-based care protocol, which means that there are more and more people who are now basically undergoing treatment and observation from home. So all these things come into place. And then there's a question that you wanted to ask him.
Well, I mean, you just brought up the issue, Dr. Muga, the issue of resources and asking for this proper allocation of resources to counties. Is this a problem then in getting ready?
Yes. I think also, we like I mentioned, we must appreciate when this COVID-19 began, counties had not anticipated to get a crisis of this magnitude, and therefore attempts to, and this came towards the very end of the third quarter of the financial year, and therefore a lot of the county activities had been done, and therefore just minimal resources would be diverted to handling this emergency from the county-owned resources. We appreciate through the initiative of His Excellency the President that we were able to get 5.5 billion support towards COVID-19, and all counties got resources. But we must appreciate also that even as you talk about the 300 beds, a county like Isiolo, where my chair of the health committee for Council of Governors comes from, only got 16 million Kenya shillings. How many beds, how many ICU beds, how many normal hospital beds can 16 million do? Even if Isiolo wanted, from the resources given, it is practically impossible for the resources that received as a conditional grant to acquire the capacity that is required. How much did
Makueni get?
Makueni received 118 million. Yes.
Was that sufficient to do 300 beds?
I would say 300 would barely be enough to do the 300 beds with ICU capacity that is required of 20. But I would say it would push us somewhere. And because as Makueni, we already have been investing in health.
There you go. So that's the point. That's the bottom line. The bottom line is that the county of Makueni...
That is exactly the point that I'm saying, that we are not beginning from the same level. And therefore, there are those counties that have stronger health systems for one reason or the other. Some historical, others because of...
focused by the county government.
What really is the cost of ensuring you have one bed that actually meets the standards that were required of the counties?
Would I say the cost? I'm not a financial expert, but...
Why I ask is because you said the 15 million was inadequate, so I'm asking, let me ask, how many beds would 15 million shillings give you?
For a normal hospital bed, a normal hospital bed that is locally manufactured, that is not a sophisticated hospital bed that are double crank and all that, the minimum that you could get a single bed with mattress and everything, with all everything, is, I would give it about 60, 70 100,000 Kenya shillings. But this is my own estimation, which does not necessarily have to mean. But there are hospital beds that would go as high as 150. There are the ICU beds, which are more expensive. To get an ICU bed would, now under the current crisis, would cost probably between 4.5 and 7 million. And
So,
therefore...
how about we approach the question then from this angle? How much would a county need for it to be able to do 100 beds, 200 beds, 300 beds? From what,
I would say,
from what the counties are presenting as their budgets, this is how much we would need to be able to raise our capacity by 100 beds dealing with COVID-19.
I would say anything between 100 and 150 million.
Okay. So about 100 and 150 million shillings, what would be a minimum? Okay. And now you're saying a county, for example, like Isiolo, received how much in this particular...
16 million.
16 million from this particular injection.
Yes.
And how much had they dedicated to COVID before receiving this injection of 16 million?
I wouldn't have the figure, but I know Isiolo has done ICU for COVID-19, has isolation for COVID-19 with its own resources. And therefore, the point that I was trying to drive is having dedicated their resources. If, for example, Isiolo says they have 120 beds, then it would mean these 120 beds is county resources. Remember, these counties have roads to do, these counties have water to provide for the people, these counties have, of course, education is almost slowed, but there are programs in even the education sector that are running and all the other functions that the county has. And therefore, I think, I would say counties have done extremely well, moving from almost 0 beds in March to close to 30,000 beds now, which to me is already a good sign and is work in progress. We have not yet seen the worst of COVID-19.
Are we close to 30,000 beds, Dr. Ari? Less than a month ago, we were less than 10,000 beds.
We were specifically at 6,000, just over 6,100 beds across the country.
Yes, we are approaching 30,000 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now this is not well distributed across the country.
That is the skew that I'm talking about in terms of counties not being at the same level.
Okay, so Dr. Ari, if we are now looking, I mean, you just said it now, we've not seen the worst that COVID has to serve up in terms of transmissions around the country. That's one. You've also said that you're more or less impressed with how things have been carried out by county. So now let me ask you, are you comfortable knowing that COVID has not served up its worst yet, and you're happy with the way things have progressed at the county? Are you comfortable that should COVID serve up its worst, counties then would be able to take care of its people?
Let me start by saying yes. I am not comfortable.
You're not,
and I continue to say this is work in progress. The moment anyone says that I am now ready, then they would be lying to the Kenyan population. So it is work in progress, beginning from almost nothing and progressively moving towards something. So that is exactly what is happening. And therefore, I would say, yes, indeed, we are not yet there, but there is a movement towards there. COVID-19 as a disease, how it is going to affect this country, even the best of experts cannot with precision say it will be to this extent. When we get out of this, we can't know. Because one, in the beginning, the government did extremely well in terms of containing the spread of the disease in the first few months. Then, because of economic realities, people started going back to their normal lives, and therefore the spread of the disease spiraled. And with opening up of areas where there was cessation of movement, this disease has literally spread to every corner of this country. And therefore, what that means is we can't, as of now, because without behavior change for the citizens, because I keep saying this, that the ultimate response on this will be on the Kenyan citizen. The government can only do its best in terms of giving the guidelines, in terms of no one will come to my homestead and tell me, this is what you must do. Because when I'm in my own homestead, I'm in my own private space. When I'm in public, I will have my mask. But it doesn't matter who comes to my household. How many people visit my household? Where are they? How have they come from? Who have they interacted with? Because these are the opportunities that the disease is spread. And therefore, I would say, much as I say we are not comfortable, the situation in this disease is rapidly changing, and I would say everything that we are doing can change, and therefore there are realities that we have come to learn. The last time I was in this very hot seat, we were talking about ventilators, but no one is speaking about ventilators anymore, because research has shown the value of ventilators may not be as huge as we had initially thought. So availing oxygen alone may be life-saving. You know, at the time that I was in Spice FM in March, the thinking was that this is a purely respiratory disease and is like a flu. But research has shown that this is not a flu. This is a disease that affects literally all organs of the body, and its mechanism of infection is through immune response. It affects the immune response, what we call cytokine storm, and therefore, and I'm sorry to use that word, and therefore...
No, please explain that term. It's actually a very interesting term, and it must be explained. Please explain it.
Yes. The disease, when you get COVID-19, the virus, the body, in an attempt to fight the disease, has an immune reaction to fight the disease, and it produces as it attempts to fight the disease, it produces what we call cytokines, which are immune response chemicals that now start eating the body. So now, and therefore, you die from the body kills itself in an attempt to fight a disease.
So is it something that would attack anybody, or some people more predisposed towards it than others?
It is, of course, it will depend on from person to person, because one's immunity is from every person has their own immunity, and how it reacts to a disease is dependent on their own innate factors, and therefore it's different, and therefore you can't predict. And it has been shown people with comorbidity, people with other diseases, diabetes, hypertension, asthma, cancer, HIV, are more vulnerable. And these are things that we are learning now. This information was not here with us in March, and therefore we are learning, not just in Kenya, everywhere in the world.
It's global.
And we have seen from countries that we are ahead of us in terms of epidemiologic cycle. First China, then Europe, Italy, Spain, then the United States, then we went to South America, where Brazil, and now we are keenly studying what's happening in South Africa, which is a country that shares all the risks that we share in terms of HIV prevalence, in terms of non-communicable disease, in terms of population, black people, and all that. And we are keenly studying. So we are, I would say, because we are a bit late and we bought time by the very restrictive measures that we had, we are able to learn from others and now respond. So my answer to your question is, it is not a straight, you have had all that explanation. It's not a straight answer, yes or no, but there are so many factors that need to be considered.
You've brought in the issue of South Africa, which is something to talk about. Seeing what is happening in South Africa, the rise in the number of people getting infected, the rise in the number of deaths. We are even seeing now that they have queues of people approaching cemeteries because there are more and more people going to be buried. This is a question that then Kenyans would ask themselves, looking at our own government, looking at our own preparedness and the level of response that we are seeing. Are we going to get to a point where our health system will not be able to cope? is that going to be faster for us than it has been for South Africa?
I would say, and this is for every Kenyan to make that decision, that do you want to have your health system overrun? And if you don't want to have your health system overrun, then we would not be seeing what we are seeing in the news nowadays, that people are in clubs, drinking overnight and all these things. But if we continue behaving the way we are, as sure as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, we are going to have our health system overrun.
So is our government, looking at all these things, looking at the behavior of its citizens, is our government prepared to deal with this surge that's coming?
Can I say first, the government only has a responsibility to a certain limit. In terms of communication, risk communication, even 2-year-olds in this country know what COVID-19 is, how it is spread, how one can mitigate getting the disease. Mm-hmm. Even 2-year-olds in this country have the information. And I've been moving across the country, and in Makueni in particular, and I meet 2-year-olds who can barely say their name, but they know what corona is. And therefore, on the issue of communication, the government has done. Now it's a question of how does the knowledge that people have translate into behavior change? I have been to places where I find people still gathering, and none of them has a face mask. And when you ask them, they say we thought we are safe. We are in the village. This disease is affecting people in the cities, and all kinds of excuses. So, and there are also those young people, especially who think because they are young, they are unlikely to be affected adversely by the disease, and therefore, out of ignorance, they don't adhere to the protocols that have been laid on.
Which points to gaps in information.
So, Dr. Muga, if you're saying that the information that has been passed on, communicated by government, has been adequate, you said that government has done its part, right, in giving out this information. Yet, yes, you have people who are not following. So are you saying that despite the government doing everything that it possibly can to put this information out there, Kenyans are just not listening to the government? Why do you think this is?
I think, and I am a pro-democracy person, and I support democracy. I think our democratic space in this country, and you can look at our neighbors, Uganda and Rwanda, who have done extremely well in terms of containment, is how have the people been socialized to adhere to rules and regulations that are issued by the government. Mm-hmm. Because of our bigger democratic space, I think Kenyans feel when you tell them, okay, you can't sit in a restaurant for eating services, then they tell you, my right. When you tell them to put on mask, they tell you, my rights. When and all that. I think that is the point that we have not been accustomed to situations where we must adhere to rules.
Dr. Muga, are you saying that our neighbors are not democratic?
I have not said that. I do not have the capacity to say that to begin with. But I'm saying,
what is it that they... Okay, let's maybe put that question a little bit differently, Dr. Muga. Then what is it that they have done that has... Because then we would assume that communication was sent out to people that heard. What is it that they have done that has made people do then what they have said? Different from what has happened in Kenya.
One, I must say, Uganda as a country and Rwanda have had an experience with viral hemorrhagic fever, Ebola, which we have never had an experience. So therefore, Ugandans have gone through a phase where they have dealt with a highly virulent infectious disease. And
please remember, Uganda also had a serious attack of HIV.
Yes, but not any different from what we had in some parts. But HIV being a sexually transmitted disease that calls for someone has to in 95% is sexually transmitted, and therefore that one we may say how it is spread is not like Ebola or or COVID-19, and therefore what has happened is from that experience, Ugandans know what public health measures mean. It is about the safety and the life of every person, and not the individual right. And I think that is what I think I would call the difference between Uganda, Rwanda, and
Kenya.
Our neighbors, DRC, which despite having weaker health system, seem to have some level of response that has kept the number of cases down, and that makes the whole difference, I would say. So this is the first time Kenyans, after a very long time, maybe in the 70s, the smallpox, that are getting into public health measures on containment of an infectious disease.
Also, then that also points not just for the citizens of the country, but also the government. The government has never dealt with this kind of thing. That could also explain the slow nature of response, or the uncoordinated response that we've seen in many times during this COVID-19 response.
Can I say, in terms of government response, and I work for government, and I know I know someone may think I have a bias. I think the Kenyan government has done extremely well. I am yes, in terms of response, right from contact tracing, emergency operation, setting up isolation centers, and all that.
The whole thing on paper has been done very well. On the ground, however, Bona CEC.
To me, if I was someone who was to ask the missing link in terms of the COVID-19 response, I would say it is the citizen.
Oh, really?
The citizens of this same country, Kenya?
Yes.
So it's more the citizen than the government.
Let me speak from Makueni. Let me speak from Makueni, because I have been on this journey every day, every minute, passing messages, educating the people, and doing everything. And we kept saying for like 2 months, when we did not have cases of COVID-19 in Makueni, 2 or 3 months, we kept saying, please stop hawking. These truck drivers, these trucks will be the entry of this disease in Makueni. And we kept telling the people every single day, please, Mombasa Road is a high risk. When the disease came, it came through the same Mombasa Road, through the same route, and the same. So really, I ask myself,
because all the government was doing was talking to the people, and yet the government had the instruments to take some action. And this is why we are saying, at what point does the government come in? CEC, just let's take a quick break, because we'd like to say goodbye to our audience on KTN Home. They've been watching us from 7 o'clock up to now. It's coming up to 8 minutes to 9 o'clock. The audience on KTN Home, thank you very much for tuning in. This is A Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Taking a quick break. Join us again tomorrow, KTN Home, 7 a.m. to 9 o'clock. But the conversation with the CECM for Makueni, Dr. Andrew Muga, continues right after this. So the conversation continues with Dr. Andrew Muga, and this is what you were saying, Dr. Ari, that the government versus the people, and the response by the people and the response by the government. So just to give you an example, in the previous hour we were talking to Dr. Mochonda Chibanzi, the Secretary General of the KMPDU, and for example, he told us since April, when the government announced that you were going to do a lot of things for the healthcare workers, employing more healthcare workers, rolling out some insurance and allowances for healthcare workers, a lot of those things have not happened to date.
Maybe the question that I would ask, and with all due respect to the unions and their representatives, is what has not been done and what is not in progress. Because when the government promised to pay risk allowance to healthcare workers, I am aware that at the end of this month, all the healthcare workers will receive the 3 months risk allowance. When the government said they are
So
going
at the
to
end of this
more
month,
healthcare
they are going
workers,
to start receiving the allowance,
yes, they
Wait.
will receive with arrears.
which means
In arrears.
May and June they did not.
They did not because to see to one, to resource, two, to create the IPPD code for that and put it. It takes time. The government processes take time.
Yeah.
Yes.
During an
Even during a pandemic.
like this.
You know, if what you are saying, Daktari, was only during the COVID period, I would agree with you 100%. But what we're saying is something we've been seeing from time immemorial.
When we are talking about public funds, we must always remember that Dr. Mulwa is not using private funds and therefore can only adhere to the regulations that have been put in place by the Public Finance Management Act, and therefore for accountability and transparency, government processes must be followed. Of course, during emergencies, I appreciate that things need to be done in a different way, but that should not replace transparency and accountability.
So that's one admission that, yes, it's true that they haven't received their allowances yet and they haven't received their insurance yet. Number one, tick. He was right.
But
Number two,
all of them,
employment of doctors, of extra healthcare workers.
The employment of doctors is now complete. I am aware that all the specialists and the doctors that were to be employed was complete 2 weeks ago, and the doctors are getting deployed as we speak now to the counties.
Counties or in Makueni?
I am talking about the recruitment. There was a
There was a nationwide recruitment.
There was 2 levels of recruitment. County recruitment for nurses, public health officers, lab people, all the many health worker cadres by the county on behalf of the Public Service Commission. Then, because we did not have time, and these were staff that were supposed to be engaged for UHC, and because of the crisis, we had to push the recruitment to be done within a short time. And therefore, and this was to give us 9,500 healthcare workers. That process in 70-80% of the counties is now complete, and these workers are on board.
They're on board. Are they aware that they're on board?
They have already, like where I come from in Makueni, we already have the 243 workers, healthcare workers that we want to recruit. They are already working.
They're working.
They already have their appointment letters. They are already in service.
When did they start working? Was it this month?
We had 2 cohorts. The first cohort began in May, and the second cohort began in the beginning of June. So that process is complete. But there was another, because when COVID-19 came, we had to get specialists, anesthesiologists, we had to get ICU nurses, we had to get doctors. This could not possibly be done by each county advertising their own, because to get an anesthesiologist, you may not get one for every county.
True.
So we agreed to do a national recruitment, then deployment to the counties. That is the process I'm saying, and that is what the doctors have been saying, because that is the recruitment that was to employ the doctors. It was done. It is now complete. The doctors are being deployed.
So when do you expect that these doctors and other medical workers will then actually start doing their duties in counties apart from Makueni?
I think in all counties, the ones recruited nationally get deployed this week. The ones that were being this week, the ones that got deployed by the counties, in 80% of the counties they are already working.
They're already on the ground.
Yes, they are already on the ground. So therefore, it's not as bad, because, and I'm talking about 9,500 new healthcare workers that have been engaged since COVID. That's not a small number, is it?
As we conclude the conversation, Dr. Mulwa, so your boss, among others, are going to be having a meeting with the president today. The COG summit with the president to review what is happening across the country and what other measures can be put in place. And the conversation, and we'll be conducting a poll online and on air in the next hour, is to lock down or not. to have stricter measures imposed by the government or not? What would you advise?
To lock down is valueless. Locking down will not change a thing. The only thing that I would say in terms of restriction is because we can identify, because the beauty about COVID-19 is a disease of clusters. You can easily identify in this area, this is the hotspot. It is now to give counties powers to manage their own hotspots in the best way that they can. To me, that would be the game changer.
Give an example.
To say, like, for example, within Makueni, we have 6 sub-counties, and we have several towns. Right now, from the data that we are getting, the tests that we are doing, we seem to have the disease around Kibwezi area. So it is for Makueni County to now sit down and say, how do we do epidemiology control within Kibwezi? We can have strict restrictions and say, no market in Kibwezi, no movement, curfew begins at 7 in Kibwezi, no opening of hotels, no churches within that area. Then we can say we have managed the epidemic within Kibwezi. So that to me would one. Number 2, there is something that you mentioned in terms of preparedness that I think makes sense in terms of preparing. We have prepared for the cases in terms of the cases when the people get sick. We have prepared for home-based care. We have prepared for all that. We have prepared for contact tracing. But there is one preparation that we need to think about. If we get to the point where South Africa are, that we have to bury people en mass, are we ready? I would say that's the major gap.
Are you?
In Makueni, for example, yes, that's a major gap. And we need to look at this thing critically. In Makueni, for example, last week alone, we had 5 barriers for COVID-19 cases. These barriers would require us to provide healthcare workers
with PPEs.
The protocols with PPEs. For every barrier, we are talking about 8 healthcare workers. These PPEs, the cheapest that you can get full kit in this market is about 7, 8, 10,000. So we are talking for every barrier 8 people, which is 60, 70,000, 80,000 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
How practical is it when I will have 20 cases to commit 160 healthcare workers to go and bury people? So if the situation continues as it is, we will not have the capacity to do these barriers.
Okay.
And therefore, a decision has to be made so that we don't get to a point where I have seen Ecuador, I have seen Bolivia, and now South Africa. We have people who have died in homes, in hospitals, and they cannot be buried.
They cannot be buried because we don't have healthcare workers, we don't have PPEs.
Yes. So we need to.
So what decision would that be?
We prepare the whole continuum, and the continuum would mean, do we devise mechanisms for public barriers in terms of we say, rather than have everyone get buried in their homes, we have public cemeteries. We have, that is the conversation that we need to have. How do we prepare this country? Because it's an important, and I have seen the marching that governor, our chair, Council of Governors, got when he said he's preparing for mass barriers.
Yep.
For barriers. It is an important preparation.
It's an important conversation to have.
Yes. Uncomfortable as it is, it is important to have it.
Dr. Andrew Muga, thank you very much for speaking to us today.
Thank you.
And we wait to hear what the president and the governors agree after their meeting today. I'm sure what they'll be discussing is information that has come from you and your fellow CECs and other members of the task force on COVID-19.
Thank you.
Asante sana and have a good day. It's 4 minutes after 9 o'clock. Let's take a look at traffic. And then we're going to open up this poll again as well. Lockdown or no lockdown?
If Mombasa Road could sing, she'd sing a tale of clogged traffic and bumper-to-bumper issues this morning. And that's what we see all the way from about 5:30 this morning. And it's as far back as the Weybridge in Mlolongo as you get towards the Gateway Mall and then towards the SGR, Cabanas, and then further along, it's crazy town today, unfortunately. And that is still going on. Where we should be out of traffic hour in a short while, Mombasa Road, not so much. Hopefully in half an hour or so, we'll be able to see a different story. But if you're heading in that direction, you might want to wait it out just a little bit. Inbound, however, you have no problems at all. Let's look at other parts. On Thika Road, for example, it's looking good. Getting into the CBD. Outbound, however, quite a lot of traffic. And into the CBD, it seems to be clogged for some reason as well. Getting in from Harambe Avenue, Kenyatta Avenue, Moy Avenue, wherever you want to look at it from the roundabout of University Way, it seems that it's going a little bit slowly. But we should be fine in a short while, guys. Spice of MKE, if you're stuck somewhere, let us know and we can maybe give an alternate route or send people away from that area.
.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Traffic.
Okay, so we've talked to the doctors, experts on the ground. The two of them basically have a clear picture of what's happening countrywide. The Secretary General of the Union of Doctors, Pharmacists and Dentists knows what is happening on the ground. The chairman of the Forum for CEC's Health also knows what's happening on the ground. And when you listen to them, one is saying that the counties is not really happy with the level of preparedness from the government, and the other one is saying, well, a lot of movement and a lot of progress has been made with this, and still more progress is being made. More conversations are taking place, which brings us to the conversation that we're having now this hour, which is a poll we want to conduct even on our social media platforms, Spice FM KE on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, where we're live streaming. And the question is, to reopen or not? Should the president revise the restrictions that were there 21 days ago? Right now, we have free flow movement of people. COVID is about movement. We have free movement of people. We still have got all those advisories and restrictions in terms of schools are closed. There's the advice on maintaining a physical distance. There's an advisory, and actually it's a regulation now on wearing the face mask while in public. All those are still in place. But in terms of movement, people moving from this area to the next, restricting that movement, as we saw earlier, should we head back to that? Should we maybe adopt what the CEC, Dr. Andrew Mulo, has said? Give the counties the powers to make those decisions. So a county like Isiolo, for instance, can see that there's a growing cluster within Isiolo town and says lock down Isiolo town itself. But other parts of the county, there's still continue operating as normal, of course, with the observance of the strict measures. Which way, Mr. President?
It's, again, going to be a tough decision. It could be something that it could decide, but it has to be informed, unfortunately. Because of the way society in which we deal in, it has to be an informed decision. Everybody's going to come and give their information. What worries me, however, though, is that we've seen, just from this morning, evidence of the fact that perhaps information presented is not a true picture of what is on the ground, unfortunately. Over the last couple of days, we saw so many things that are being reported. It could be that KEMSA is procuring 100,000 body bags because they're not going to be able to take the amount of death that will happen as a result of COVID, and then now is making those procurements. I mean, so many things that you hear, then you have to ask yourself, what really is going on? But on the other side of it is that, is it so difficult then for Kenyans to adhere to these guidelines? Put on your mask, observe this distancing that people are asking about, sanitize regularly and such. Because this seems to be the question that's coming out from many people. Ministry of Health, county governments, county health workers are saying, why can't Kenyans just adhere to this?
Can we just accept it's clear?
Because they're saying that if Kenyans can do this that they're being asked to do,
then the government
will not have a question about whether it needs to lock or open.
That statement, I think, enters this conversation halfway.
That's what. But did you not hear what Dr. Mulwa said? Dr. Mulwa said
what's the beginning of that conversation?
Dr. Mulwa has said they have done what they needed to do. It is the Kenyans now who are not doing what they need to do.
By his own
and that's
declaration,
why now,
works for the government. I do not expect him
to say something different.
No, not really different. He was very informative, and he said, and the perspective is also true, because you cannot have this conversation and say the government has done nothing. That will be a fallacy. It is not true. Okay? But as to whether that something that has been done is what was needed and what ought to be done, now this is the conversation we're having. Why do I say halfway? You see, the conversation begins with what has the relationship between the government and the citizens been before COVID? That's, in my opinion, where the conversation begins.
Okay.
But moving forward swiftly.
Yes.
From the beginning.
Because that is the past. And whatever relationship was there before COVID was...
It's affecting us now.
It has affected us now. Okay?
Yes. Not has, is.
It is affecting us now.
Yes.
And the reality on the ground is that very many Kenyans are not observing these basic measures. In fact, not very strict measures. We're not even talking about the issue of crossing a boundary where it's clear that you've been told don't go. It's basics.
Mask.
Wear a mask.
Wash your hands.
Those.
Maintain physical distance. 3.
Again, all right, we speak as though everybody can afford a mask. Everyone has access to water.
At least everybody can afford some distance.
They can. But you tell me, during what periods of time do citizens ignore these norms of, let's focus on the one thing you mentioned, distance keeping. When? When they are in public transport.
Yep.
Today we saw that they've packed the matatus once again.
Yes,
that one is not even being adhered to at all.
Yes. That's one. When, say, they go shopping. When they congregate in a sort of places where they ordinarily used to congregate. Okay? The strictness that was once observed by people who adhere or tended to adhere to ensuring people adhere, that has been, it's now lax. Okay? Why is this so?
I hear you saying, like, to get into a supermarket, for example, you had to line up at the door and then they let a certain number of people in. That seems to have flown out the window now.
It has, but also the supermarket doesn't have that many people, if you want to think about it. But even if it does, you're right, they don't restrict. What they want you to do is to wash your hands. And then there's a sanitizer, then they'll check your temperature. All right?
And they have signage on the floor, maintaining one distance, stand here, stand here, stand here.
But that works when you're going to pay.
But once you're all at the counter,
not even counter,
at the shelf,
when people are on the shelf,
right?
There's no distance. You know why? The good doctor mentioned something which is crucial to all this thing. Behavior change. We have heard, but it hasn't influenced us to the point where our behavior has changed. It hasn't. So everything that we see so far, in my opinion, has been predominantly cosmetic. You do because you need to. It is for purposes of ensuring that I'm compliant.
So maybe
it is about our attitude.
Yeah, so what they grapple with it is, how do you change that attitude? Because the attitude seems to be playing a major role in why we can't fight this thing.
Do we want the government to come and change our attitude?
No. What is it that is entrenching this attitude? What would make that attitude change easier? And I can mention just one thing, among others. When the government promised that they were going to look after the poor and the needy, had some of those suggestions that had been made, can this be consistent and can we see it? You see, the government does many things, but oftentimes we actually don't know. That's the truth. We don't know. because the effort that should be made in getting us to know and with the details isn't. So, had they done that and we knew that people are being assisted financially, that is one thing that would help change the attitude. You know why? The Monenchi would say, the government promised, and they did.
It creates hope.
Yes, it does. That's a good atmosphere in which you can change behavior. But if that isn't there, and what you hear is more words, your level of belligerence will go up, not down.
So in the absence of all those things, in the absence of this consistent communication on the positive actions being taken by the government, or lack of action by itself, we are where we are today, right? What do we need to see happen so that we can stop the spiraling infections in the country, so that we can reduce the number of people who require to go to seek hospital care, so that we can manage COVID-19? Because we are in an emergency. This is an emergency.
I would
it's
actually give it a different perspective, and I would say the government should stop taking pride in the 200 plus, heading to 300,000 tests they have done, and aim at 1 million tests, and talk about 1 million and reach 1 million. That will give you a truer picture of where we are. Because right now, we're in Lala full land. Because the figures we keep saying, 900, they're not invented the day they were announced. We are merely declaring what is there. That's what we are doing. So if we want to take action, as you say correctly, why don't we start with having the true picture? Where are we really with this thing? Where are we really? Forget the talk. Forget the back and forth. Give us a true indication of what we have. Then let's have this conversation from there.
That is giving us like 2 months before we start having this conversation.
Brother, those tests, we know how long it takes for the equipment that we have, the PCR machines, for it to bring out the results. It's not days, it's hours. Okay? We know how many we have. We know the capacity. It's not that we don't know.
Yeah.
We even know what reagents are needed. We also know that there's always squabbling about resources between the influenza center and this. We know all this.
Okay.
All that notwithstanding.
Practically, by the time we get the reagents that would be enough to increase our capacity from 200,000 tests in 4 months to 200,000 tests in a week, right? By the time we get that, practically in this country, this is not going to be a next week conversation. By the time we talk about a health facility in Wajir conducting or collecting samples of COVID-19, and those samples landing in a testing laboratory and the result going back to that center, is not going to be a 2 week conversation. That's why I'm saying we are going into, yes, it makes a lot of sense that we say let's ramp up our capacity, let's get the true picture, but where we are right now, CT, talk about let's get a true picture. It can be one of the many other things that we are doing, but we can't say that is the one that we start with. Before,
what are we dealing with if we don't have the
before
true
we
picture?
start having this conversation?
What really are we dealing with?
We're dealing with a global pandemic. We know it's a global pandemic.
No. Let's forget the global. Let's talk about Kenya. What are we dealing with?
We are dealing with COVID-19 that has so far killed how many people?
So what you're dealing with is almost, almost bordering on obscurity then, because you say, okay, well, we know that there's a certain number of cases. We know that this is the number that has been given. There's an idea that there could be more. We know for a fact. We know that there is more than is actually being recorded and announced every day. We know that because what was announced yesterday, for example, are not people who got COVID yesterday. These are people who may have had it 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah. What we are seeing is just indicative.
It's indicative of what the true picture is.
Yeah.
However, I actually don't think it's possible for you to have the full picture on ground right now to say because of what we see, then we can make a decision, because this thing continues to evolve as we go along. However, I do think that there are certain things that can be done in the meantime, hoping against hope that certain quarters then would get their act together. Because let's just be honest, there are some things that have not been done to the point that they should be. Regardless of whether it's a new disease and the whole globe is also suffering from the same thing, okay, that's fine. However, there are certain things that you can do then with what you have. However, because we know also that behavior change doesn't take place like that, these are some things that are going to take time, which is then where I also agree that we're still dealing with the dregs of a people who unfortunately don't trust their government. However,
number 7.
this is the number 7 of the howevers. You cannot continue to blame a government lastly on my third to last point. You cannot blame a government when something as personal as this is where the rubber hits the road. That there are certain things that you can do to stop yourself from getting this disease. And the government cannot come and ram it down your throat. There are certain things that you actually can do. But I don't know.
However.
No, there's no more howevers. But I don't know what it is that needs to be done for people to realize that
With
you
that
actually have the
realization,
capacity
with
to
that
change.
realization by the government, look, Kenyans are not following what the government has told them. Not just the government, what logic is telling them to do, right? So Kenyans are not observing. What is the role of government in such a situation? Look at the example of Rwanda and Uganda. What is the role of government? You want to tell me if people in Rwanda were just let loose, they would not get lax? They would get lax. But the government has a role to play, and it knows that our role as government is this. And
the government pulled the strings really tight, and until today has not let go of those reins. Unfortunately, here, government has.
And this is the case. This is the question. Should we get to a point where the government is basically controlling everything? Your movement is telling you, because this thing is about movement and because you're not observing that all the advisories that we've given you, we are therefore going to control your movement.
Did that horse not bolt? Where they're going to be able to come back and say, now you may not move, stay in your house from morning till evening. Because the way to get the virus from moving, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, it has bolted, but can you still go back and
chase it and then bring it back?
Yeah. When South Africa released those measures and they realized what's happening, they basically just said, come on, come back in.
Come back in.
Yeah.
But they had done it before. It's not been done here.
Maybe it's about time that
Maybe it's
finally
time.
Let
happened.
me
Does it
ask the
happen?
question if we know it. How many people have South Africa tested?
South
Over-
Africa tested
over a million.
over a million people.
What's their population?
I have to find that out. I'm sure you know the answer by the time you're asking the question, TT.
There's a point. There's you see, when we were discussing this, my mind went to something. It's a research prospect. We call it sample sizing. Is 200 and whatever plus an adequate sample size for a population such as the one we have? Is this something you can rely on to give you adequate statistics to determine the models and whatever else that the brain trust?
250,000 tests?
Yes.
Absolutely not.
Yes. So, what I am focusing on this for a very simple reason. Nothing complicated. Know thine enemy.
Actually, you know what? South Africa has performed 2,773,778 tests.
They are close to 3 million.
3 million.
Tests. What's
And
their
they have a population of 59,359,000.
They are 10 million more than us.
10 million more than Kenya. And have done 10 times the number of tests.
Number of tests that we've done. Okay. So you could say that they have a clearer picture of what's happening on the ground.
They do.
Yeah, than us.
They
But
do.
you can also say that they have a high number of infection. That you can also say that they are getting very many deaths. You can also say that they are at a point where they are feeling that their healthcare system is about to be overrun. All right?
True.
So tests is good. They can see their picture.
Eric, test is not good.
They can
It's crucial. This
they,
isn't
they
good.
can see their picture.
Crucial.
It has not
Necessary.
stopped the people from dying. What I'm
No.
trying to say, CT, is as I hear
yes.
what you're saying,
Yes.
you're taking this conversation into a very academic angle and the research
No.
side.
When I
And saying,
started,
you know
I
what?
hadn't actually. I just took it a few minutes ago.
And
but prior to that, I hadn't.
yeah, but now that's
I was
where
just
you are.
being basic.
That's where you are now.
I was
Very
saying,
academic and research and saying, okay, yeah, we need
Eric,
with what else?
all these things that the government is telling you are academic and research. When you hear the word model thrown at you,
Yeah,
You hear what Dr. Muga said about a model, and they said Lamu that they needed 87
it's
per
all
and then it's your
all on
you
some
needed
scientific
modeling and what have you.
Where is it coming from?
That is what took my mind to sample sizing. I said, oh, modeling. Okay. What
If that's what we're using, let's take it to
what
the
are you
end.
basing it on? Okay. Let me perhaps move away from academia and say this. A true picture of anything of this sort is actually very mandatory in understanding the levels and the capacity for interventions that are required. It really, honestly is. And where Dr. Muga was right, there are certain parts of this country where it isn't as big a problem as others. So the intervention would be different. It is the truth. Okay? There are parts of the country where people are so sparsely populated that unless it hits that particular community, the likelihood of it spreading to the next community is almost zero. Okay? So it is true. The modeling then comes in. But all I'm saying is, if we understand where an epicenter of a disease is, and we don't truly know, or we don't actually have an accurate summation of the numbers, then we may be talking to ourselves.
What is the threshold for accurate summation of numbers? Let's give the example of South Africa with the 2 million going to 3 million in a population of 56. Is there accuracy there?
The more people you test, the greater you are aware of the numbers per the number. For every 50 you test, you get figures, you know, and you sample across the communities that you have. You then have a clearer picture. So out of every 100, take 100 or 200. This is what we're seeing.
Yeah.
This is what we're seeing. This is what we're seeing. You then, that's a clearer picture I am talking about. So you can even talk about, so this is what we're seeing. You can more or less even work out the progression and say, given this, it isn't difficult to figure out what we're going to see next because you know where you started and where you've reached. But if you have a population of 47 million and you had 250,000 tests, let me put it as politely as I can, we could do infinitely better.
So, as we do that, as we continue with that conversation, there's COVID. It's spreading today as we speak.
Actually,
right now,
it was at the heart of the conversation, if I remember correctly.
It's continuing to spread. It's continuing to spread. Like I told you, yes, it's a true.
Eric, it's not that I don't get your point.
It's true. We need to raise the issue of tests. We need to continue advocating more tests and all, right? And then we get the feedback that we get from the government, and we also get the feedback that we also get from the experts, like the epidemiologists who tell us, with our capacity, this is how we have strategized our testing. Okay, which is a whole conversation back and forth. As this conversation continues, what else do we do?
You see, I would argue that we go the Rwanda and Uganda way and assume the worst. And then, having assumed the worst, take action from there. That's what I would presume. You've asked my opinion, that is my opinion.
Let me tell you the truth. Look, it sounds difficult to say because so many other factors come and affect it, right? The economics of it, people, job losses, etc. You don't want to talk like that without being sensitive to the fact that very many people have lost their livelihoods and jobs and things like this.
And their lives as well.
And their lives. But the truth of the matter, you want to stop this thing from moving? You want to stop this virus from infecting people? Stop movements of people completely. That's what needs to happen. Let's just look at how it has happened. You talk about Uganda and Rwanda. Let's look at what has happened in other parts of the world. The 3 countries on the globe who've been able to contain this thing properly have done exactly that. Stop movement. You don't leave your house. But then they make sure that they make a provision for you in terms of what you would need then to survive. That is the only way it can happen. Let's not try to do this dalliance with maybe, all right, maybe we can have a curfew and this, that, the other thing. Because we've seen, number one, people are going to flout the rules. They'll find a back way in and out of the city. They'll pay the people at the police stop. They'll do whatever they need to do and then make a song and dance about it. They'll hire ambulances to take children from a bar back home. Yeah, as crazy as it sounds, they'll do it. You want to stop the virus from moving? Stop people from moving. Period. However, here's a however again, it's not been possible because, we want to be sensitive to people's livelihoods and things like this.
And do one however won't cut it. We need another however.
21 days
another
ago,
one is coming.
21 days ago, by the time the president was actually saying, all right, so let's open up the movement, right? There must have been a brief from the medical professionals and from security professionals.
And the brain trust.
And
Those,
the brain trust. And even the counties who told them that we were ready with beds, who turned out to be a lie this morning.
What I'm saying is, the other side, the intelligence side, must have looked at what was happening. And we're also feeling that pressure. I mean, remember 21 days ago, the conversation was, you know what, people need to get out of this city.
Yeah.
People were feeling, look, I need to go. Even you've just given us the example from what you've heard from people telling you, the people who've gotten this cash from the government through whatever means, whether it's kazi mtaani, whether it's money for
They could go home.
they use this money to go home.
Even today,
there was
Machakos bus
pressure,
station,
full
today, because people are
End
expecting.
month.
People are expecting
that it's going to be locked
there's going
down
to be
again.
locked down after the meeting today.
Yep. So there has been a lot of that pressure. If you continued keeping people in Nairobi 21 days ago, now we'd be having maybe a different conversation.
Eric, your point is an extremely valid one. But had the government informed us, or in reality committed themselves to doing what they had said with regards to ensuring that the needy, the poor, the infirm were actually receiving what they wanted, this issue, this bottleneck and this pressure that we're talking about would have been eased a heck of a long time ago.
Yep.
Because when you anticipate and you don't know what you're anticipating and you don't know what's going to happen next, you are unclear. Man, the thing boils and boils and boils. But when you know this is what's going to happen and it happens, it's
prepared.
a different conversation.
You're prepared.
It's a very different conversation.
Yep. It's where the reaction changes between
Yes.
Nairobi and Kigali.
Yes.
Kigali, stay indoors. We know who requires support. We know where they live. We are taking it to them. Period.
And they act. You know what?
And
the
they
crazy
received.
thing is, they actually did
They
it.
received their support. Uganda, the same thing. When Museveni himself gives that, he says, look, I am going to use the military, not just police. I'm going to use the military to bring you unga for your ugali. People start saying, oh, this ugali is not enough. Come on, bring that ugali here.
Started it.
Look, this piece of ugali from that unga that I've given you is enough for you to feed yourself. Come on, stay indoors, right? And there was action from a government.
But Eric, wouldn't you say that we were able to do that ourselves?
We had the capacity at some
Yes.
point to do this.
Yes.
We did not do this,
Yes.
right? So
the
where
wheel of
we
implementation.
So
however,
here we
was
are.
Missing.
we are where we are right now, and that's why my argument from the very beginning was: at some point we need an audit of the decision making in the fight against COVID-19.
Eric, you've said this for a long time, and I couldn't. If
Who
there's one thing I
did
agree
what?
with you on, it's that one.
But until that audit, 21 days after the reopening, and we're seeing the number of cases, and we are seeing the projections, and the fear now that is, hey,
Things are getting thick.
things are getting thicker.
No, things are thick
Things are thick.
and
Getting
getting
thicker.
thicker.
People are going to hospital. They're finding medical professionals who do not have PPEs. The medical professionals are turning them away. So we are in a situation where things are just up in the air.
They're spiraling.
But the government thinks that they've done pretty much
Immaculate, I think is the word that
much
was
as they
used.
could do.
You know, at some level, Eric, if you think about it, though this particular question wasn't really answered, even if you took the 15 million that was supposedly given to, say, it was Isiolo, isn't it? And you assume that one bed costs 15,000. Okay, no, I give it 100,000. You still have 15,000 beds.
Yep.
Okay? But for that unit, it isn't just a bed. No. Even if you have the personnel, there's other equipment that you will require to support the bed.
True.
There'll be linen. There'll be this. There'll be the other. There'll be the other. My point is 15 million shillings is not little money. That was my point.
It's quite some money.
Yes, what you can put up at not one, but several things that is 15 million shillings. It's a lot of money.
28 minutes to 10 o'clock. Then we'll open up the phone call 71. What? Should he just tell us, you know what, Kenyans? I cannot tell you to do anything anymore. Just observe the measures. Remember, I told you it's between me and you. It's our personal responsibility. I urge you to maintain personal responsibility, or should the government rein in on the Kenyans? 0719 012 600.
All right, guys. Unfortunately, that accident on Mombasa Road has claimed 2 lives this morning. Getting out of the traffic and then speeding down is not a good idea because that has caused now massive traffic in that area. A looming demonstration at Utawala around because of the road condition, and we saw that starting earlier this morning. And so there will be some traffic there today. And again, we see a situation where the roads should have been fixed that's causing massive traffic. Other parts of the town and the country seem to be doing okay with traffic this morning. Headed outbound on Thika Road, that's where we see there is some, not as chock-a-blocked as Mombasa Road was. So it's staving off in some places. Other parts you need to look out for, specifically Utawala and Mombasa Road. Apart from that, guys, it looks good. Spice of MKE on Twitter, not to forget. You can get in touch just in case, but for now, it looks good.
So, what should the president
Traffic.
announce today? Should he? Should there be some restrictions for movement measures? Dr. Andrew Muga of CC for Health and Training, he told us, well,
You are tuned in to Nairobi's #1 soul station, Spice FM.
Are given the powers to come up with their own lockdowns. They don't have that power right now, right? It's a national government issue because it's a security issue. The law that is in use is the Public Order Act. So that is one option. The other alternative is there are very many people who have said, just let's go back to locking down Nairobi and lock down the counties. Others have said lock down each county. So if you're in Murang'a, you cannot go to what are the neighboring counties of Murang'a. You cannot go to Kiambu. You cannot go to Njeri. You cannot go to Machakos. You cannot go to Kirinyaga County. You are within. And there are those that are saying, you know what? This is already gone. 0719-012-600. I'd love to know what you think. Wakabi says, we are sitting ducks. We are beyond the lockdown. This thing has gone everywhere. We are at the mercy of oranges, garlic, and ginger. And we are exactly where we were on March 9th. March 9th was before the first case was announced, but we already had suspicion of a first case of COVID-19. It's beyond. This horse has bolted. We incubated this thing in Nairobi, and then we opened up from the incubator in Nairobi and allowed it to go countrywide. So where we are right now, lockdown doesn't make sense.
Key word, according to Mercy Kamau, is discipline. Kenyans just lack discipline, including the hygiene kind, and that's the end of the story.
But that would be the beginning. No, not the end, surely. If they lack it, then what then must we do to ensure
How
that they
can we instill discipline?
Yes. What do you know? I mean, what do you do?
Because the reality is that this disease is spreading. The reality is that there are very many people who are taking precautions, but there are very many more people who are not taking precautions. We still have today's. Is it what cartoon is it? Is it The Nation or The Standard, which has depicting someone saying, "I do not know anyone who has. I've never met anybody who has COVID-19. I've never met anybody who has COVID-19." The next thing that person is like, help me. I can't breathe. It's actually The Nation, right?
It is on page 14.
Weighed down by the weight of that virus. Starts off by saying, I've never met anybody who has COVID-19, because that's what the conversation among very many people.
Throws his face mask in the dustbin.
What is it?
Gets a crowded bus terminus. Yes. You see, that story of I don't know anyone must be looked at perhaps in, should we say, given an interesting perspective. I'm using the word interesting here because when you deny that something is what it actually is, what really are you doing? It goes beyond just not wanting to, not facing the facts, but it is more of not wanting to face the facts. And you don't want to face the facts because the reality is, if you then confront it, then and you probably look at your circumstances, you then have to wonder, then what do I do?
What do I do?
And usually you're met with a sense of helplessness. So you'd rather just dismiss the idea or the notion of it, so you don't have to deal with it at all. Because as far as you're concerned, it isn't there. So why is it a problem? With all these pictures of people who are gasping for air, people who have problems, people who have complications. Now, if your basic problem is just feeding yourself, do you really need to have another problem? No. Because you talk safety, money. Okay? Unless you're going to a supermarket. So unless you tell me you're going to wash your hands in that supermarket for the whole day. Once you wash your hands. No, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
Yes.
But there's the other reality. You talk treatment, money. And this is something that
Just
needs
go
to
the
come
whole
to the
chain.
people.
Money,
Testing,
money. Face mask.
If you get COVID-19, the cost of buying a face mask is about 25 bob, 30 shillings. If you're admitted for COVID-19, the cost of treatment is in the minimum 50,000 shillings. So do your balance.
The cost of getting a test is 10,000 bob. Right.
Yes, in a private facility.
In a private facility. In a public facility, when they were still allowing it, it's around 5,000 shillings. Right, between 5 and 10,000 shillings. Vis-a-vis 25 bob to wear a mask, for example. Which one do you want to choose?
Just make your choice. I mean, which is better for you? What do you want to do? Do you want to get yourself to a point where you're telling people, I got COVID, I'm in hospital, and I cannot be admitted because I don't have cash? Insurance is not paying.
Eric, the cases that come to my mind are people who the papers report as having done everything that was required of them, and yet. Now, the yet explains why it is that personal care must be taken.
Yeah.
It is not what you're doing, it's what other people around you are doing. If everyone is doing what they should do, then the chances of actually getting COVID are reduced significantly.
Zachary is on the line from Nakuru. Zachary, good morning.
Oh, good morning, guys.
Morning.
How are you? How was your weekend?
I'm okay. How was your weekend?
Good,
Ours was good as well.
Mine was somehow curtailed because of this thing. Somebody was calling me, calm now, calm. But this thing actually should go.
What happened, Zachary?
We don't understand what you're talking about.
Mwarim, let me tell you.
Yes.
You know, we are told to share love everywhere. Spread love.
Okay.
And mostly it is spread during the weekend. But now this COVID, actually, it is curtailing happiness, yeah?
Okay. We get it now.
Now, you are having a very good discussion, yeah?
Mm.
And what I may say is this, yeah? Hello?
Yep, go
yes,
ahead.
We're listening.
If you ask those who have suffered from COVID, hello?
Yes, go ahead.
They'll tell you that they got infected while they were looking for their daily bread, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
If Eli or Mwalimu or Nduh was a billionaire, a dollar billionaire, that case, yeah? They would comfortably be sitting in their houses. That means that the chances of them getting this disease is far much reduced, yeah?
Okay.
So everywhere, even in America where we are having a surge, yeah? You are seeing that those guys went out to demonstrate about the Black Lives Matter, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Immediately after the killing of this black man, Mr. George Floyd, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it was a need that everyone had to go out and participate, yeah?
Okay. To the point now, Zachary. To the point.
Yeah.
What should the president announce today?
That guy is between the hard place and the rock, yeah? That's what they say. He still remains in that place because right now I'm preparing to go outside and probably supply some wares that I do make, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Who is going to convince me that now stay in the house because there is COVID outside, unless he comes to tells me that he's going to pay my bills, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I won't fear. Would I rather die of hunger and starvation and being locked out, or actually go out and at least getting? I better die well trying. Yeah.
Okay. So the president should not have a lockdown. So then, how do we stop the spread of COVID?
He should not think of a lockdown in the first place. Hello.
How do we stop the spread?
the spread is going to be maybe not stopped but curtailed, minimized by actually, like you guys, the media guys and everybody, trying to actually repeat again and again that is what we call public awareness, yeah. The way we did with the AIDS, yeah, the AIDS pandemic, yeah. But locking down, it's impossible in a poor country like ours.
Are we poorer than Rwanda or Uganda?
We are poor. We are.
Are we poorer than Uganda or Rwanda?
Cumulatively, we may be rich. We may be richer than Uganda and Rwanda. But okay, the country may be rich, but me as an individual, that is the majority. What do you? It's a country of we are having 10 billions. I mean, 10 guys who owe billions, yeah. But the rest of us are paupers who depend on, from heart to mouth, yeah.
You're not answering City's question.
No, I think he's determined not to answer my question, and I've understood you're not going to answer the questions. Let me ask you another one.
Ask.
Do you really think our poverty is in material wealth?
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
It's not.
Okay, let me challenge you this, Maureen, yeah? In your neighborhood where you stay, I know you stay in a high end, the one that they call the suburb, yeah? Green Reef. There's something like that, yeah, to describe some of these places, yeah? I know you come across in your everyday life, you come across this what with Sijui Mama Fuas, yeah? You come across these border guys. You go and get 10 and tell them, I'm going to provide you with the upkeep, your daily upkeep for about 10 days, yeah? And then you are going to see whether they are going to go out tomorrow. They won't.
Okay.
They will comfortably sit into their house. So we lack.
I get the point. Zachary.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's stay in Nakuru, and your neighbor Karaoke is there. Karaoke, good morning.
Good morning to you. How are you guys?
We are
Fine, thanks, Karaoke.
It's a long since we talk to each other, eh?
Yes, indeed.
We've been wondering where you went to.
I'm around, we are businessmen here and there. Every now and then you are making noise at the market there. You know that? So I want to contribute onto this agenda that we've been having since morning. And I've been listening to you since morning. And in fact, I can't see the reason as to why the president did what he did at that other time when there was lockdown. Remember that? And I told you there was no reason for him to open. So even now, I don't think he is going to use any reason, either to open or not to open. I think if it comes to decision making, and especially now that we are affected as a country, the number is rising. I even don't know where he's heading. I even don't expect anything positive from this gentleman. If at all he opened that other time. And remember, since March, we expected him to lock the country. You remember that?
Yeah.
Now, remember he took the decision of locking the two cities, Mombasa and Nairobi. And instead of maintaining that lockdown, he opened it. And remember the tone that he used when he opened it, by saying, you go and affect your grandma at the rural areas. Remember that tone?
Yeah.
Wash our hands.
I did not expect a tone like that come from a head of state. In fact,
so today you don't expect him to make any decision today that is different from what was made.
If he is going to make any decision, I don't think it is a positive decision he is going to make. He is going to make even things more worse than it is today.
Okay.
Can I ask you what would be...
I don't expect any decision from this gentleman. After all, he's a failure from the word go.
All right. So we have other callers on the line. Let's hear from Solomon in Mombasa and then Sifuna in Bomet. Solomon, good morning. Solomon. All right. So let's hear from Sifuna. Sifuna, good morning.
Morning, sir.
Yeah. So how is Bomet this morning?
Bomet is okay, but it is like we are just in another world. We can't see anybody even putting on a mask.
Nobody is observing these measures.
Nobody. The only thing I think we should do is only to put this thing in total lockdown. Even if people that are saying only border cannot withstand this, it is better we suffer for a little.
We've lost him, unfortunately. Solomon is back on the line. Solomon.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, typically no one is observing the rules. Even if you give these people money, they share. First of all, the largest population are the youth.
When you say these people, Solomon, who do you mean?
Everyone. And especially the youth, below 35.
Okay.
Below 40. So even if you give them money to stay at home, these people are very active. So
they'll come out to spend the money.
Yeah, exactly. Secondly, when it comes to the people who are depending on the model that we are using, that is contract testing, vis-a-vis mass testing, find when you do contract testing, you get accurate data where for example, because if you test 1,000, you expect at least 200 people to get positive. Vis-a-vis the mass testing, where you can test 1 million, but you only get 2. So depending on the method that Kenya is using, especially the contract is much better. Because if I'm positive, that people who are contacted with this for the last 2 weeks are tested, there's a likely chance 50% of them will be positive.
Okay, Solomon. I think there's also something not very good with your line. Orithi in Nairobi, good morning.
Good morning to you, Eric.
Welcome to the Situation Room.
Yes, it's my first time calling you.
Karibu sana, and
I appreciate your conversation. I wanted to make an observation. I concur 100% with what Chief Muga said regarding the testing. From the testing current, the more they test, the more people they get who have contracted the disease. That means already the disease is widespread. So for us to get a true picture of how spread it is within the country, why can the government, for example, carry out samples in every county, say 100 tests per county in total for the 47 counties? Then from there, we'll know how wide the disease is spread. Thank you.
Asante sana, Orithi. John in Nairobi as well. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine,
Fine, thanks.
Yeah, so I operate as a cab driver. And of course, I lost my job in May, and therefore this is what I have to do to feed my family.
Right.
Even though I'm exposing them to the risk. Because typically in a day we carry about 25 people. And the reality is that about only 40% of the passengers would put their masks on. Some would insist on, of course, sitting on the front seat. But my feedback regarding the question you asked is I would say that President Uhuru Kenyatta should actually open the economy. The reason I'm saying this is that, of course, a lot of people are actually suffering. Unfortunately, the money that was supposed to go to the elderly is not felt. There's no database of the majority of Kenyans who've lost their jobs, and therefore they need the government subsidy or some form of help.
Yeah.
And therefore, of course, lots of people are actually traveling the country. In fact, a few of my neighbors have also moved out, either to renting cheaper houses or going up country because they no longer have a livelihood.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think the aged and people who have pre-existing conditions are the one who actually is supposed to stay at home and therefore get help from either the government or their relatives. But because this disease is not going anywhere now, and the testing that the government is doing is very low, then everyone should go back to work. And if the economy is a little bit healthier and people have some form of livelihood, then I guess that would be a start to tackling the pandemic.
Thank you, John. Sifuna is back. Sifuna, you were making a point.
Yes, I was making a point, but my credit is done short.
Paule.
So I was saying, we as Kenyans, or must just use only one way, and it's the most hardest way, but you have to use it. Because when you look like the Minister of Health are using a lot of money per day. If you can convert that money to total lockdown for about 21 days, I'm double sure that our country will be healed. The way Uganda and Rwanda has just done, they are very poor. Somebody say that they are not poor, but they are poorer than Kenyans. So I just beg even the president, if you can just think the way I'm thinking, like now Nairobi. See, Nairobi are recording 500 plus. If they put just total lockdown the way they did to Isili and the Old Town in Mombasa, I think we will be somehow better. But if I told that he's going to say anything opposite with this, let us just expect worse.
It will get worse. Taking your opinion this morning on 0719-012-600 on what we expect the president to announce after a meeting with the Council of Governors today. Geoffrey in Mombasa, good morning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Well, according to me, I feel the president now should let the governors now to decide the decision on their counties, because it's beyond his ability to now take control of the entire country. It's up to the governors to show leadership by assessing the state of their own counties and decide whether they can lock down or leave it open. Because you see, when we had a few incidents, the president decided to lock down some areas and to create cessation to certain areas. But now when the things started escalating and people were complaining about economy, he had to let it. Now, I think the responsibility rests on the governors, if indeed they are leaders of their own counties. Thank you. Do have a great day.
Let me just ask you before you go off.
Go ahead.
These county leaders that you speak of, who we were told a while back were supposed to have a certain bed capacity in each of their counties, their chairman read a report and told us only 21 out of the 47 were not prepared. And yet an inspection done by the president or a team from the OP found that only 5 of them had actually met that minimum requirement. These are the people you want to trust the lives of the citizenry in their counties.
Well, now the most unfortunate thing is all about we as the citizens of this country. Who do we choose as our leaders? Do they have the values and the capacity to lead us before you choose on them? Because these unfortunate things are happening because of the way we choose our leaders. And of course, this matter regarding COVID should be a personal responsibility. It's beyond the president. It's even beyond the governors, because we failed. This, we must accept it.
Thank you.
Asante sana. Thank you very much, Geoffrey.
Good day, guys. You are doing a great job.
Thank you so much, Geoffrey.
Hey, so now the president will be meeting with the ladies and gentlemen who run our counties this morning. They will be reviewing what has happened so far, our response, our capacity to handle COVID as the numbers continue rising. What would you say he ought to do? Now, you as Nduh.
It depends on his... Okay, well, it would depend on his intention. If the intention really is to curb the spread of COVID, then there's no other choice but to lock down. And I would say even lock down specific areas where you find, with the information that you've been given, where you find that cases continue to rise. That, again, is indicative of the fact that there could be more, that there likely is quite a lot more in terms of infections.
Okay.
If that's the intention, that's the only way.
City?
A wise man? I'm deliberately
No.
going there. Eric, if indeed an audit or an inspection was done, then an explanation is required by these very same governors. Where did the money that they were given for these things go to? What did they do with it? It's not a complicated question, and I'm sure it's a question they can easily answer.
Bottom line.
Bottom line. And then you can move from then to ask the same question of the monies they receive yearly to run their counties and the plans that they have, and mirror the plans they have with what is on the ground and the monies that have already been spent. It is a colossal amount of money.
I think from where I sit, we incubated this thing in Nairobi and then we unleashed it to the country. The government now is the one that should be taking action. Yes, people are behaving the way they are behaving. They're not going to change tomorrow.
Nope.
But maybe when they start seeing deaths closer to their homes, people will start changing. But by that time, our healthcare system should be ready to deal with the rising number of cases. And I don't feel like we are at that point. People are still being asked to pay. People are waiting for about even a fortnight in some cases to get the test results for COVID-19. And this is not an acceptable situation. Anyway, a wise man?
A wise man does the following. He fills his brain before, number 2, emptying his mouth.
So that's what the president should do.
Don't go around telling us that the 21 counties that are the only counties that haven't met, when only 5 have actually met the bare minimum. But now he has filled his brain because he has said, let everybody just account.
Yeah.
Yep.
Everybody account for themselves.
Yes, so the chairman has filled his brain. He has decided, let everybody just speak for their own counties.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much for tuning in to the Situation Room today. Join us again tomorrow, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock.